facing multiple charges of arson in Natrona County. This is 46-year-old Dallas Smith. Smith was arrested by Casper police this past Tuesday.
God.
Everyone have a good evening. Good conversations, good food. Sleep time. Cool. Well, day 2 of our Q3 Wyoming Workforce Development meeting. And before we're going to do roll call, I got to mention that I've been excited about this trip for a long time. Not only for its location, but
Introducing a teacher who was inspired to create this entirely new way of learning.
we're going to kind of kick it off right after we do our roll call. We have a workforce housing panel that I'm really excited about, moderated by Jerry Henderson from the governor's office. And so I think we're going to be able to learn a lot. And like I mentioned yesterday, I've mentioned multiple times, there's ideas here that you can take back to all of your counties in Wyoming. So obviously Jackson and Teton County face unique challenges, with their industries, but does not mean that can't work somewhere else. And we're really, really excited about our panels. Thank you, panelists, for coming today, for sure. Then we're also going to jump into another topic that all of you have been very interested about, which is healthcare. So I thought, having the second day with, conversations around housing and healthcare was going to be really, really impactful. And then we're going to go through some reports of our one-stops, and then we're going to end today as we kind of wrap up, which I'm very excited about, we have spent the last couple of months rethinking our brand for the Wyoming Workforce Development Council. We've talked about that, making sure that we have a really strong mark that stands out. They really can't be confused with any other agency around the state of Wyoming, and so we, over the summer, Danny and Bria and the advocacy committee spent a lot of time working on that, so we'll give you a sneak peek of what is to come in November, so we're excited about that. And then I will briefly talk about our new subcommittee structure and the charter process that all of you will begin in October. It's crazy, it's next month. October is next month. And then we'll wrap with some committee updates from all of our chairs of our subcommittees, and then we'll have some council discussion and public comment time, and we will adjourn. So I'm already taking up enough time. I'm really excited about today, and I want to get into the meat and potatoes of the meeting. So I will go ahead and call the meeting back from recess. And Jennifer, will you please take roll call?
Governor Mark Gordon or designee.
Present.
Senator Dan Roxfeder. Representative McKay Erickson. Chair Eric Trowbridge.
Present.
Vice Chair Michael Kircher.
Present.
Brian Bledsoe.
Present.
Tony Cross.
Present.
Larry Fodor.
Present.
Taylor Tinnis. Bria Hammond. Katie Hogarty. Travis Lawrence.
Present.
Deborah Zolnowski.
Present.
Wendy Fiskett-John. Danny Bureau.
Present.
Tom Van Cleef.
Present.
Stacy Galtan. Charles Wilson. Tina Conley.
Present.
Nathan Williams. Philip Cornella.
Here.
Brenda Morgan.
Present.
Dan Meyer.
Present.
Mayor Shane Lundahl.
Present.
Commissioner Peter Nicolason.
Here.
Director Elizabeth Gagan. Here. Executive Director of the Wyoming Community College Commission or designee. Vicki Harper.
Present.
Superintendent Dagan Felder or designee.
Present.
Corinne Schmidt or designee. Josh Durrell or designee. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, we're going to jump right on into agenda item number 15 this morning, which is our workforce housing panel. Presenting today will be our own Tony Cross. We have Ty.
Yes, close enough.
All right, welcome, Ty. We're excited to have you. We also have Thomas Kinney.
Hello.
As well as April Norton. Welcome. And it's going to be moderated by Jerry Henderson from the Governor's Office. So, hand it over to you, Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, council members. Good morning. As the chairman said, my name is Jerry Henderson. I'm the housing policy advisor for Governor Mark Gordon. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to moderate today's panel. And on workforce housing. Chairman already introduced our panelists, but maybe a first for them might just introduce themselves to a bit about the organization.
Yeah, hello. This is kind of like group therapy for me about housing and employment. I am Chief Admin Officer at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, so we go from sort of 0 to 1,000 miles per hour. In summer we have about 680 employees, and then if you get back to me in 3 months' time, we have about 1,800 employees, so our housing needs skyrocket and then come down. I've been over there for this is my 9th winter season now, and I think I'll tell a little bit about our story in housing, and I'm very lucky to work with some amazing community people as well, because I think this is a story where it really does take a village to answer some of these questions. So.
Hi everyone, April Norton. I am the director of the housing department for the town of Jackson and Teton County. Ty serves on one of my boards, I have a couple, the housing supply board. We manage about 1,500 permanently protected homes for the workforce here in the county. And our stated goal for workforce housing is to have 65% of our workforce living in Teton County. Right now we're at about 60%, and we've been holding steady at about 60% for several years now.
So I'm the head of human resources at St. John's Health. I think well, sorry, my name's Tony.
I know your name.
Thank you. Okay. I've been here for about 9 years as well. Sounds like
Me too.
we're around the same time. That's funny. I believe that we are the largest year-round employer, so Thai staffs up significantly in the winter, but we have around 900 employees that we employ year-round. We have a very small amount of seasonality. I actually live in Drapes, so I commute over every day, so I can talk about this both from a perspective of the employer as well as my own housing challenges. Happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm Tony Cross. You heard enough about the airport yesterday. I've been here 10 years.
Oh.
Oh, senior.
That's funny. It is funny. But yeah.
Can I'd like to share just a quick story. I've actually lived here for 21 years.
Yes.
My first job was for Jerry's dad at Photographs in the summer of 2004. So you were a baby.
Well, thank you all for joining us today and one, engaging in this conversation, but also being leaders in the community. Really grateful to have you all. We're here to explore a topic that directly impacts our communities, our economy, and our workforce. So as you can see, our panel brings together perspectives from both human resource leaders in Teton County and also local government housing authorities. So I think that's a pretty good reflection of public-private partnerships that Wyoming needs to address this complex, really unique challenge of housing availability and accessibility. So I'm actually going to start us off with kind of give a statewide perspective on the status of housing in the state. And I'll talk about, so in 2024, the Wyoming Community Development Authority commissioned the statewide housing needs assessment. And in that report, they found that between 2021 and 2030, the state has to add between 20,700 and 38,600 housing units to meet projected needs during that time. Of those units, between 1,400 and 2,600 need to accommodate households of 30% of the area median income or lower, and between about 160 and 2,150 units have to accommodate households with an income between 31% and 50% of the area median income. So that report, which I'm pleased to share with the chair of the commission, looks at housing trends statewide, supply constraints, and also projected needs. Additionally, net housing prices. So from 2019 to 2024, statewide residential assessed value across the state increased by 73%. Now, of course, different communities, something's different. So in Teton County, I looked up in that same time frame, residential assessed values increased by 116%. In neighboring areas, Lincoln County is running at 22%, Summer County 76%. So obviously, a large increase in revenue. Since then, I think it's leveled off a little bit. I think that burden is still for a lot of numbers. So obviously, those are statewide figures, but the issue of housing varies between communities as they have different levels of projected growth. They have different levels of existing infrastructure, different resources to address the issue. So I'm really grateful today to be joined by local leaders that can maybe dive into the weeds of this area in particular. So I'll actually start off with you, but maybe you can take a picture of maybe the unique challenges faced in Teton County and also the slums.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So Teton County, 97% of our land is public land. Which means we have about 3% of our land is privately owned, and of that 3%, about 3% is zoned for housing. The rest of it is one per 35. So we have a really, really limited resource in housing. As I said before, 65% of our workforce living locally is our stated goal. In the past 10 years, we have added about 1,700 dwelling units, but the type of dwelling units matters for us. So we've added a bunch of homes, most of them are second homes. We have global demand here. We have very, very, very healthy job growth. We're adding, adding jobs every year. We're at between 2 and 4% job growth annually over the last 10 years. That's tremendous, great, but it's hard to find places for those folks to live. What we've done in the town of Jackson is we rezoned much of our town to allow for denser housing. So 3, 4-story buildings. We have some minimum densities in the town of Jackson. I'll get into this when we talk about our toolbox. But we've spent a lot of time not only studying the issue, but then putting into practice, some things, whether it's regulatory or incentives. So we have a lot of incentives in our land development regulations to try to get the private sector to take advantage of some of the density we've provided. So we have density bonus tools that have been really, really successful here. We've seen hundreds of homes that have been built by the private sector utilizing those tools. So we've been lucky that way. We have diverse funding resources for our housing programs. That includes general fund dollars, specific purpose excise tax dollars, and then fee and lieu mitigation fees. And I know that's a hot topic around the city, but those 3 are really our primary funding resources, and they're all really, really important for our community as we try to, again, provide homes for people who might work at the mountain resort, or might work at the airport, might work at the hospital. My husband is on the search and rescue team, right? And I think about the fact that he gets, several calls a week and needs to be here to go out on rescue, to be our teachers to be here. My husband grew up here, and he tells stories about being a kid in elementary school and middle school and high school. You might have the same experience where we didn't have snow days, right? Everybody just bucked up and went to school. Now we have snow days because we have admin and teachers that are driving over the pass from Victor Triggs. They're coming up through the canyon, and they can't get here. So then all of a sudden, your school's closed, mom or dad, maybe both sometimes, are not home from work. So they've got to take care, especially if you got younger kids. You're home, you're not at work. And so there's certainly a ripple effect there. So thinking about how do we maintain our community by providing housing for certain service providers, our key infrastructure workers. That's a lot of conversation we're having here. And I know that's a conversation that a lot of companies are having around the state. And so happy to be here and happy to again, dive into our toolbox here.
So now I'll go to the employer perspective. So with that framework, mention how that impacts your guys' ability to recruit employees, retain employees. Maybe I'll start down there and tell me, you gave a little bit of preview yesterday.
Yeah, I think we have the same challenges that every employer valley has. There's, Tom talked about seasonality, and Ty did as well. Ty has a lot of seasonal people. So I think that recruiting strategies a lot. But one of the challenges that we have here at the airport, we have a lot of positions that are very specialized and require certain educational barriers or certifications or whatever. So we're frequently doing nationwide searches for certain positions. We do have some entry-level positions. We provide a lot of training and stuff like that. But we get a lot of applicants who think, oh, Jackson, that's a beautiful place. I live there. Sure, I'll throw my resume in the mix. And then I probably spend more than half of my time talking to those applicants. And you get 5 feet down the road of that conversation, they take one look at this community and they go, oh, whoops, sorry, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, that's like a regular occurrence. And so it's a recruiting challenge for us from 2 perspectives. One, we are spending a lot of time talking to people who really are viable candidates. And secondly, it's really a challenge to highly specialized positions to bring people into this community and really into the state, not just the community, the state. And So anyway, I'll leave it there. There's like a litany of challenges that we have around that, but that's one of them. And one of the things. So sometimes with candidates from out of town, we get pretty far down the road and they make a real effort. And we make a real effort to help them with housing resources via various means, and they still can't pull it together. So I mean, we've gotten 75, 80, we've offered people jobs, people have accepted them, they've made plans, they've made every effort possible with the airport's help, and they still can't even get here. So that's what I'm
Yeah, I'll wait for the plane to pass. It's perfect timing. Similar situation in the sense that for many of the roles in healthcare, we are looking for very specialized skill set, education, positions that don't exist in town. Like I usually say, if there's a nurse living in Jackson, she either works for us or has decided not to. Like we're rarely surprised to find a nurse. We're going, again, doing national searches. When I started 9 years ago, that was the question, is like, how do we find a nurse and make it possible for them to live here? Now it's become, how do we find a doctor and make it possible for them to live here? Like, we have had a similar situation with Tony, where we have had 5 general surgery candidates who came here, highly qualified, loved us, we loved them, loved the community, and after 95% of the way down the road said, I can't make the math work to be here. So again, I think we share that. The thing that I would add is, on the retention side, we see people who want to be here, decide to make it work, and make some sacrifices, kind of whatever that is for them, driving farther or moving, you know, to a smaller place, downsizing, maybe spending more money, maybe all free. But they go, you know, I can make it work. And they make it work for a couple of years, and then a life change happens. They have kids, they get into a relationship, and suddenly they want more than a rooming situation or an apartment situation. They want a house with a fence and a puppy. Like, that's not accessible at any cost. Like, again, even for someone who is a highly paid profession, like the medical profession, or a surgeon who is a highly paid profession within the medical profession. And it's interesting, we have seen our employee base, we started over 60% of our, 9 years ago, over 60% of our employees were here, and it's trickled about 1 to 2% per year to where now we're down in the low 50s. And they're just getting pushed farther and farther out. I've got employees who are commuting from Idaho Falls, Du Bois, and they're leaving because they just, again, they pay more and there's reasons for them to be here. It's a high quality place, like the kind of culture that people want to live and work in. But after a couple of years, they just go, too much of my life is sitting in a car, and it's not sustainable, and they wind up going somewhere else. So, and again, like, that's a self-perpetuating, like, downward spiral, because as you lose those employees, now you have to replace them, and you're back into the recruiting cycle again. So, like, my goal is very simple. Like, I want people who want to be here to be able to be here, and I want them to be able to stick around and put down roots and become involved in the community, join civic organizations, volunteer, serve on boards, and actually, that's like, to me, that's what builds a community. It's not this constant transient workforce that we've sort of settled on as a necessity, but isn't really serving anyone's best interest.
Hey, time's up.
Yeah.
That's the secret puzzle.
Yeah, I think the thing we have that's unique and trending here from all of us is that we each play in solving this problem in our own space, but there's also collaboration across our businesses, which is very, very unusual. Usually if you're in one business, you compete very aggressively with another business on profitability and talent and all of these other things. I think in this space, if we have a win, put our hand up and go, hey, I had a success, and how can I share those successes? Because I need a valid hospital. I need search and rescue community members. We need an airport to support the bigger things in our business. We have a little bit of a different strategy. We play in housing in 3 areas. One, seasonal housing. Someone just wants to come work up at the resort for a season and then go. We have about 250 beds that we occupy, that we manage for that. The second space is, hey, I've been here and I've done that seasonal aspect and I really want to put down roots, but you know, to Tom's point, I don't want to live with, you know, 4 other dudes in a house. Okay, so we'll move you to town long-term housing. And then the third pillar of that is how do people acquire their housing? And that's either free market housing in areas, you know, a little bit further away, in which case we also have to be very aware of transport, or it's affordable and workforce housing we pay for. So they're the 3 particular areas that we play in to solve those particular problems. And I think you have to either work it out yourself or partner with a community so that the sum of floating that tide floats all boats. We worked out that after 5 years, our turnover is less than 0.5% because people have solved that particular housing problem. So that's us.
Thank you, and I think that's a good segue. I'll stick with you 3. My next question is like, what's the private sector's role in addressing this problem? So I think you gave an overview of the non-resort, but how about you tell the hospital, how do you view your role in this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I have, well, a couple of things. We are about to break ground on our most ambitious housing project ever, and probably will be the most ever. Like, this is it. This is the last bullet left in this rifle. But next Wednesday, we have our ribbon cutting and ceremony on the hitching post, which is going to be over 70 units within walking distance of the hospital. Nice 2 bedrooms. We really believe it is a game changer for our recruiting and our retention. And it is only possible because of partnerships and support from the community, as well as what we're doing as an organization, because we believe it's an operational necessity for us. So it is going to be paid for partially through special excise tax funds, partially through philanthropy. So the community has stepped up, and again, believing that good healthcare is necessary for a strong community, donated money, chosen to give money to that, and we're also funding it through our operations, again, because we need to. It's a weird position to be in. I've been in HR for 30 years. I've never had to have conversations about value engineering and whether a balcony is better than storage units, but here I am. So yeah, I mean, I have said from the beginning, and this is a journey that started many years ago for me, when we started campaigning for those bad funds, it has to be a partnership. We can't solve this problem by ourselves. And, you know, again, I think the community has to believe that it matters, that, you know, making it possible for people to live here is what makes the community thrive. And so, you know, yeah, we need organizations like the Housing Authority. I love Habitat for Humanity and what they're doing. We have employees that have found housing through those kind of means. And again, like the organizations that recognize it's a need are having to step up and do things we never thought we'd have to do. But ultimately, we have to talk about what is a win for everyone, what actually helps support the community, supports the organizations that make the community possible.
I think that covers it. I mean, I think, yeah, we have, again, similar challenges. I echo everything that Ty and Tom just said. And I think to your question about what is private industry's role, I think that, you know, varies widely, and it's, you know, the airport's not exactly a private industry, but because of our corporate structure, we sort of operate that way. And I think the simple answer for us is we have to dedicate the resources that we can to the problem. And it comes down to money and how we can support people in various needs. We talked about, yesterday during our presentation, we've got some really wonderful benefits here that are designed to support people's economic challenges, whether that challenge is called housing or whether that challenge is called a commute from Idaho Falls or whatever. But we make financial choices, which by extension means we don't have money for other things. So it's sort of we're constantly kind of juggling multiple balls and trying to evaluate where to allocate the resources that we have to best support our staff. We have some limitations in terms of what we can and can't do, a little different from the hospital and mountain resort in terms of building employee housing and things like that. But I guess the short answer is we kind of have to do what we have to do. And we also I feel like what Tom said really resonates. I've also been in HR roughly 30-ish years, and I've never spent more time calling developers or people who are thinking about building housing sometime in the next 10 years, or talking to our staff about Habitat for Humanity housing and how they can apply for that and taking them through that, or the various things are there's always documentation that people need filled out for their housing applications and stuff. That's become a huge part of what I do because we, like Ty mentioned, we find that once we have people for somewhere between 3 and 5 years, we got it. Yeah. Almost all of our turnover is prior to that. And that's where we just see people go through the same cycle. So I sometimes feel like I'm a 3-card Monte dealer on the street. I'm kind of going, hey, you want this option, you want this option? And I'm just trying to help people, keep it together for that period of time until they can, land somewhere in a way that's more stable.
I think to sort of piggyback what Tony was saying, I just think we are further down the road of what an employer's responsibility is than other people, right? I think, Apple's involved in housing. There's insurance companies in Cleveland that are now saying, what is involved in housing. This is the future of what everyone else is about to face. Yes, it's a Teton County problem. We just heard it's a Wyoming problem. This is going to be a national problem, and it's people are looking to the employer to say, what are you doing to support my mental health? What are you doing to support my physical wellness? What are you doing to support, my out-of-work activities? And what are you doing to support my housing? So to take this from a sort of very theoretical conversation to a very tactical conversation, you're hearing you've got to get involved. It's not part of the job description that I applied for 10 years ago. But I think you need to say, how do I answer tomorrow's problems today? And I think a good example is, we have to educate ourselves and reach out to great people and say, what can I build? How do I build it? I've got deed restriction components here. How do I use local resources to say, add more value and build denser housing and get the resources, of the housing authority to be able to build more inside a smaller space. And I think one of the successes we've actually had, and this is going to be a challenge to this group, is that dirt is very expensive. If you can get the dirt, you've solved 90% of your problems. Once you've got the dirt, the cheapest way to build a housing is not to build it here, because labour and cost of building materials is very, very expensive. So we had a project that we actually did, and we had the dirt. We knew we were going to build something, but then our people, aren't highly compensated if they're lift operators and they're supervisors in a retail store. So we can't charge them high rent rates to pay back all the loan costs to build housing. So what we did is we reached out to a company, and unfortunately it was outside of the state of Wyoming, to say, we want you to prefab and do all of this construction outside of the state. We then want you to ship it all over here and put it on this on this plot of land, and now we've built and constructed something that where we can get return on investment for rental rates, so it's flat. We don't aspire to make money, we don't want to be landlords. We don't aspire to make money, but we can't lose money, right? So how do we make it a win for the community, a win for our employees, and a win for the business? I know the Wyoming business, and I think you should tell your story as well about prefab housing, because that's a success story that can be emulated. The Wyoming Business Alliance is asking ourselves, do you know there is not one business in the state of Wyoming that will do prefab construction, right? If we could somehow talk to our local representatives to get tax benefits to set up somebody in the state that does prefab construction, we then have someone in the state that we can now leverage local benefits for, so it will be a successful business, because there's a need for that. To have that group then transport individual pieces around the state. Now we've got something that is sustainable for our state and for my specific problems and needs. And I think what you did with some of those housing pieces, and you did a much thorough research than what we did at the resort.
Yeah, I mean, right now, you're going to Minnesota to get your prefab product, right? Or you might go to California, but it's a little bit cheaper for Minnesota. There's a great outfit in Colorado that actually received a program-related investment from a philanthropic foundation based in Denver to essentially, they took them to a small town. This was part of their economic development plan for that small town, and they set up the manufacturer there. But yeah, it's a huge problem, and shipping costs are real. I mean, the bigger your project, the more expensive it is to get here, especially. You're coming over a pass, or you're coming over multiple passes, or you're driving up on these narrow canyon roads. Then you have to find a place to stage these units as well. We've worked with, on the public side, we've allowed private developers to stage on public land just for a couple of weeks, because we recognize that it's quick and it's an easier way for them to get housing built. But certainly it's something that I'd echo. It'd be fantastic to have maybe more than one local statewide resource in that space, because right now there are none. And it also poses, I think, challenges for building departments. You have your building official who, in our case, has actually gone to different factories to walk through units so that he is comfortable with what's getting built. But not every community has the resources to send somebody to do that. And so again, having a more local option, I think, is a really good deal.
And the state of Colorado did that, so it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel on something like that. The state of Colorado had this conversation that we're having in this room, and then they took some tax dollars and they had a massive incentive for a local prefab businesses to be stepped up. Then they had tax advantages for businesses within the state of Colorado to use that particular provider. And I think it was, the return on investment was supposed to be 3 years. I think it sold itself within 6 months.
Wow.
So
I have one thing I want to say to answer the question. Address the question about what is the private sector's role. Because there's a piece of this which is good and bad that I think is important to talk about. And that is, again, as HR, if I can lock people in, they're in employee housing, they're not going to leave. That's good for me. That brings some stability. The downside for the employee is, if your housing is tied to your employer, you are now trapped. And if somebody wants to go to Star Valley Health or whatever, again, it's a win for me, but I think you have to talk about if people are expecting their employer to provide their housing, the downside of that is it reduces their flexibility in their options.
Well, and building on that, I think it also, in some cases, can reduce the employer's flexibility. When you know that your person, that maybe isn't doing a great job for you, but if you let them know they're going to lose their housing, their insurance the same day or in the next couple of months, that way, and I hear that from employers all the time. They're like, we do not want to be in this space because we don't want that much power. Because you get to know people. It's a small town. we're, the state is a bunch of small towns, right? And it's hard to look somebody in the eye and say, hey, you're not a great fit here, and oh, by the way, give me your keys in 2 weeks. It's challenging.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, there's another factor maybe a little less pertinent in this conversation, but like, so I have lived in the valley for almost 12 years. Prior to that, I lived in big cities my whole life. And so I work mainly in private industry where nobody cares about poaching from other companies. But we have as competitive an employment environment as there is in the country, in this state and in this county. But this is a small town. Like, I know Tom, I know Ty, I don't want to poach from them. Because I know I'm going to be making more problems for them. And we're lucky, actually, that the airport and the mountain resort and the hospital really are going for kind of different people. So we don't have that problem, but there are these sort of community aspects to like how we, I think the point I'm trying to make is that all of these pressures really get applied in ways that are challenging, not just for housing or the points that Tom was just making, but in terms of how you relate to other employers in the community as well.
I poached.
And it's okay.
We have a check-in, a chicken surgeon.
April, I'll go back to you. Parallel question, what do you think the public sector is going for?
Yeah, so in Teton County, we have, in the past 10 years, have really shifted our focus from being a developer ourselves to partnering with the private sector to develop projects. So we are all in on public-private partnerships. One of the first things we did when I came on board 9 years ago, 9 years and like a couple months, is we did a land inventory, which I think like is low-hanging fruit is something that's obvious, but no one has done a land inventory. So, you know, I got GIS out and said, like, what land do we own? Do we have zoning on that land for housing? And if so, like, how fast can we get an RFP out to find a private developer to work with us? We have, in the past 10 years, we've done 10 housing developments, so about 1 per year. Last year, we CO'd over 100 units in 3 projects. One was a partnership with Habitat for Humanity, so we pretty much always have a partnership with Habitat going. We typically buy the land for Habitat, and then we put in the horizontal infrastructure for them, and then they build the vertical infrastructure. It works really nicely, and it serves very low-income households with an ownership product. We did a public-private partnership with a local community foundation and family foundation. We built 57 rental homes on the land was privately owned, 6 lots were privately owned. They were in the lodging overlay, so they purchased them to build a hotel. Over years, I'd say my first conversation with them was about 8 years ago, talking to them about the importance of safe, stable, affordable housing for their employees, because they own other hotels in the valley, but how important it is for this community to thrive. The county, we own 4 lots next to them. So I found them because I did land inventory and said, who are our neighbors? Do we think that they would work with us? And lo and behold, they did. And they provided $10 million in philanthropy and more than that, about $12 million in a program-related investment there. So again, utilizing, we had some below market debt in that deal, and then we had some public funding from mitigation fees that we put into that deal. 57 rental homes, and they serve households that earn about 30% of median income up to 200% median income. So the full gambit, because like most other communities, we've got certainly the need for low-income housing, but we also have the need for middle-income housing because people can't afford to get into the market here. Again, I talk about type of supply a lot. I hear this all the time. I was an economics major, I get it, but it is not simple supply and demand in this valley. Because the highest and best use for any piece of land is not going to be building a house that somebody can afford. It is going to be building a $5 to $10 million home that someone who doesn't live here now, but who maybe has visited and thinks it's nice here, would like to have in his portfolio. Drive around East Jackson, you'll see it. We just approved a subdivision in northern South Park area, and the lots down there are starting at $850,000 to over $1 million per lot, which means you didn't have to build your home on that. that is not affordable to any of your employees, even your surgeons, any of your employees. So that's not serving our local workforce. Y'all have to spend higher and employees. Our third project we did last year was a low-income housing tax credit deal. So again, we have different buckets where we are trying to access any and every tool we can to build housing. And for all of these projects, we utilize density bonuses, whether it was a density bonus on the Habitat for Humanity deal, where we were able to just add a couple of units because of the zoning in which that project is located. Our 2-for-1 workforce housing bonus has been a huge benefit for our community, and again, we were able to utilize that and at the Jackson Street Apartments development, that 57 unit development, and then the LifeSite project. I'm pointing at you because we use the same tool that the hospital used for Hitching Post, which was commercial accessory residential units, so commercial ARUs, and they are they're built apartment style, but they are accessory to commercial use, and yours is accessory, it's right across the street, but another density bonus tool. So again, you know, we're leaning into public-private partnerships. We have been able to leverage, I think we have contributed about $40 million in public assets, and that is utilizing, you know, a current fair market value for land, even if we purchased it in the 80s. I like to use what's it worth today. We've leveraged over $250 million in private capital to build homes. So that is a huge return on investment. Really proud of that. And also, it's still really hard. You know, it's expensive to build here. The land is really, really expensive. It's one of the hardest nuts to crack. We've got different community pressures. I mean, I think there's a lot of reaction locally to growth and development, whether it's new hotels or it's new workforce housing. People, you know, when people observe their community changing, I think that sometimes that's scary for folks. They see their roads getting more crowded. They see the line at the post office is longer. You know, and all of these things sort of are driving, I think, our current community conversations. Everyone is at a baseline very supportive of workforce housing, but they don't love change. And change is hard. And change is hard in every community. I was on the phone with my mom, who lives in South Carolina, on my way out here. She's been going to town council meetings, talk about this workforce housing that people are building. And I said, no, my job is not. But it is, and what I hear in that is fear, right? I hear that people are scared about how communities changing. One more thing that we haven't talked about that is important here, and I think is important in other spots in the state, is childcare. So it's childcare here is more than double the national average in cost. When I had my first child, my husband and I actually started our own daycare because we couldn't get into daycare. And we had the time and resources to do that. And it was a co-op, and we worked with the health department to get it going, and the community foundation, we got a grant. So it was a creative solution, but that's not for everyone, and only certain 8 kids. But it is very, very expensive. We've done at least one housing project where we provided 30 workforce homes, and then on the bottom floor, we have 5,700 square feet of childcare space. And that is, we are providing, we purchased that space from the developers. We bought it back, we negotiated a price per square foot at the beginning of our sort of ground lease deal with the developer. And now we are renting that space at below market rental rates in return for below market childcare rates for local workers, with a preference for county employees. So that's, again, when you talk about it's not just housing, it's not just the other help, other amenities we're looking for. It is childcare. It's that full wraparound, I think, care for our community members, and employees.
Thank you for bringing up those community pressures. I'm interested from our employers then, do you experience the same pressures? What other challenges do you see in terms of providing housing for their content?
Yeah, I think that to elaborate on what Oprah was just saying, you have to bucket your current employee needs, your future employee needs, housing, transportation, and daycare into the same bucket. You can't think of everything in isolation. We provide our own daycare. We found a building, and we have been very lucky to say to our people, if you wants daycare, we give subsidised daycare here as well. And I know we talk about it a lot about, okay, what's the IRS, tax limit on daycare, because we can't charge our people too little because now they're paying a fortune in tax, and we need to protect them there, and if we get them to pay more in tax, what does that do to their rental rates? It's this really sensitive balance that we've got everything involved in that. But daycare is probably analogous to housing, right? You have to start solving tomorrow's problems today. I mean, how far do you think ahead in housing problems? How many years?
Oh, I mean, every year we have a 5-year housing supply plan, but we're looking at a 10 to 20 year horizon right now. I mean, that's the way we're thinking about it at least.
We have land that we're very fortunate enough to have some land that is that we are putting together a transportation hub on, and we're talking about that would be a great location for daycare because people are already driving to hop on buses and they're going to be there. They can park their car there, they can drop their kids off at daycare, hop on a bus, get to somewhere else. I think one of the things that we've petitioned as well to the state government in Wyoming 2 years ago, we did not have HOV regulations. We had to get a petition to get HOV regulations in the state because if we're having transportation, it'd be great to have an express bus somewhere that's faster because on 22 here, 22 has more traffic on it than I-80 outside Rock Springs. So all of these pieces are in a sensitive dance together, and to think about the whole experience and how do we solve those components collectively is super, super important. And I'll let you tell your story about,
Yeah, sure. Similar situation. So we operate a daycare right across the street from the hospital. Again, we're fortunate to be able to have that building, but it comes at a cost. It's subsidized over $500,000 a year in our costs to provide staffing and all of that. Again, operational necessity because particularly with a lot of our clinical staff, they work 12-hour shifts. There's not childcare in town that's going to keep your kid from 7 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. So I think you're right, just having to think about it holistically. And I'll plus one the comment about transportation. I come over from Driggs every day, and I'm very fortunate that the START bus provides a commuter bus. I love the START. I don't know if I would still be here if I didn't have the START bus. It's still, time away from my family and time away from my job. It's way less stressful than sitting in a car by myself staring at the taillights in front of me. So I also think about, we've got some land in Alpine that we haven't developed that was intended for employee housing, and we're still thinking about it. One of the challenges that we found there is the schools are in the opposite direction. There's not a school in Alpine. So if you're a parent in Alpine, yeah, it's a 45-minute commute, but if you have to drive half an hour to drop your kids off first and then come back, that becomes, again, just a logistical impossibility. So it really, I think, completely have to think about all of this together as you're thinking about what does it take to live and thrive in.
It's also good too. So
Yeah.
the new development, East Jackson Hospital, I'm curious. Obviously, you mentioned how you have some community support around that.
Yeah.
Is that always the case? Are there community pressures like you mentioned? So, how'd you ever?
Yeah. I was in a meeting 5 years ago with our foundation, and there were people there that said, you will never get community support for housing. It's something that people just don't believe is their problem to solve. And I think a little bit of that is the work that our foundation has done and that board has done to educate people and build support for, again, critical services. And part of it, I think, is just an evolution in people's thinking. People are recognizing all the things that we're talking about and making different choices about where they see a critical need and how they support it.
I think it's all very different, right? So you've got public-private ODR that benefits constraints. You obviously have a very good flat product that we can't actually do, but and so how divided by the full-time equivalent, which is 2,080 hours, and you can have an actual number of what an employee's value to the business is. And so then we start turning around and saying, oh, if we don't have like 4 people, that's this many hundreds of thousands of lost revenue for us. We should invest in housing and daycare because we are able to solve these problems, because there's a real business impact on that. And if you want to even bigger another story, do you remember when we had the road collapse over there? Like, we pooped our pants because we are like, what do we open? What do we close? What do we do? We were, and I know all of us were saying, hey, do we pay people to commute for like 2 hours? Are we now in the transportation business because all of a sudden we're trying to rent buses for our employees to drive, 2 hours when what should be a 40-minute commute? What happens when 20% of your workforce doesn't show up the next day because they don't have access to public transportation? So yes, there is a real impact, but it is also a sensible business decision because I can't think of a better outcome where our employees win, our businesses win, and our community wins. And if that's your end goal, you will always be successful in some part. And we have failures as much as we have successes. There's things that I wish I hadn't done in employee housing, but I wouldn't stop that from moving forward into all of these areas.
Quick point on that. During the Teton Pass road closure, which was a year ago?
I've taken it and put it in a very dark place.
Yeah. So that affected about 50% of the airport's staff. And so, we don't really have the ability to go, hey, can you just work like twice the amount this week and so forth. So we, for several weeks, we rented, I think it was 20 some odd hotel rooms in town, which you all know the prices of those rooms. Plus then we paid people who were willing to drive around, which in some cases, some people who lived in Victor and it took them 45 minutes one way, it was then taking them 3 hours one way. So that was, to get back to the earlier question on, I know this wasn't exactly the nature of your question on the role of private industry, that's what ends up happening. But we don't have any option as far as keeping this place open. And so when things, little bits of the infrastructure, it's hard to call that little, but that really affects everything.
And that, funnily enough, was a good example of public and private partnership. We have a lot of regulations that you can't camp by the side of the street. So the county and the town, they were changing regulations in real time to say, well, can we allow people to park RVs on public land? Maybe we should do that for this period. We were asking, can we have people in tents? So they can do it. Can we change our local regulations so we can allow, more people than we should have in a house because people are sofa surfing? And I think that is a great example of what that looks like. We had tents out, in our parking lot. We look like Burning Man, especially if you know our type of employees. And so, yes, I think that's the collaborative component that I think you have to walk away. And what you're doing over here and what you're doing over this side of the table should be shared. We need to have more of these conversations about how do we work together so that we can all use common resources.
Yeah, I want to give each of you a chance to talk about that a little bit. I think you've all talked about one, the private sector, seeing each other as partners, work collaboratively, and also work people in the county and the town as well. So I guess I'm curious, how have we gotten to a state where that partnership and that mindset is shared, and maybe is there any lessons learned along the way on how to make that cooperation better? Anybody would like to answer that?
Yeah, I think we don't value this unfortunately often enough. I wish the 4 of us said, we should get together and we should value time. Unfortunately, I go and open my email and then 4 hours of my life disappears. So I think what we have to do is, you have to show up with a good head and heart, right? There's a lot of altruistic tendencies over here. We're going to involve in housing. because we think it's the right thing to do. I also think, you have to be open and honest. We don't always agree, right? But I know that, people here will show up with really good intentions, and I don't want to surround myself with people that agree. You need to have this rub and friction, right? Tony needs to say, I'm doing this in housing, which is a very different way, and I'm putting in people's paychecks. I get bent out of shape because the very next day people come into my office and go, the airport's paying people a housing stipend, why don't we have a housing stipend? But I think it's because between what we're doing here, I need people to see my blind spots. But I need to show the areas that are my pain points as well. And I think that is the conversation that we always continually have. Okay, what now? What's next? We got here. What got us here? What will get us there? So how do we get there? And without action and conversation, it's not going to happen. The only reason the four of us are up here, and it's not someone else for another business, is that we choose to do something. And I think that's the important part.
For the record, I get people who come and say, well, I could get a job at the mountain resort and they have housing. So it goes both ways. But if you,
I put my business card all through these offices.
We might. Bring it on. I'll just give a really simple answer. Maybe this is oversimplifying, but I think there's really no other choice but to work with as many people as you can, publicly and privately. Like I said, I feel like I spend half my time on the phone. I'm calling this group all the time, going, what are you doing with this? Or I think I'm constantly badgering these people for ideas. But I'll take a call from anyone who has anything to do with this. And so it's really like there's no choice but to partner with as many people as you can. And when I talk to people across the state too, I forget who it was, but I know like Sheridan has really huge similar constriction problems that very much resemble Teton County. Not just Sheridan, but that's the example that came to mind. And I see that same thing happening where everybody there is talking to everybody else as much as they can. There's no sense at all in like siloing yourself on this issue. So.
I guess the only thing that I would add is, really thinking about how do we get to what I would call, it's a little cliche, so I apologize, but like win-win thinking. Like what is a win for us? What is a win for the community? What is a win for the employee? And there's tension there, right? Like there is a real concern about expanding the population and increasing housing, impacting the reasons that people want to be here, the wildlife corridors and the green space and the blue space. That's real, and that's a real tension. So how do you get past those kind of tensions to find something that really is a win for everybody? You have to come to these conversations open, and you have to come to them with skill. Because I think the opposite, like what I see now, is lose-lose. Like a lose-lose is, we're paying people more, which costs us something, and they still leave because they can't live here. So I think it is absolutely possible, and I think it starts with that commitment.
I think we can't be afraid to try things.
Yeah.
Because everything's not gonna work, right? That's okay. We've got to be willing to sort of fail forward, if you will. And in the government space, it's scary because if you screw up and you're on the public sector, you're going to yelled at, and everything is available for everyone to look at and judge. But I think that it is important, whether you're private sector or public sector, you've got to be willing to try new things. Because there's a saying about doing the same thing over and over again creates the same results, or there's insanity in there and all the things. So it's a dynamic world, and I think if COVID taught us anything, it was we've got to be willing to try new stuff. It's not all going to work, and that's okay. And we've got to communicate. So, yeah.
And I think an example of a win, that we're talking about in this conversation here is we were at the Mountain Resort when I started 15 years ago.
Well, I've been here a long time. A long conversation.
So when I say started sudden, we were trying to solve our own problems. It was like, we need this, and everyone was scrambling over a very scarce resource, right? And I'm like, this is kind of a little bit crazy. And I called up some of the businesses that have complementary seasonal adjustment starts, like the golf courses, like a lot of the clubs. And I said, do you have housing? They're like, yeah, we have housing, but we need more. I'm like, I have housing, but I need more too. So we rent some of our housing to, golf courses and summer clubs. And then we ask in winter, hey, can we rent your housing? So now they're not sitting around with empty houses in winter, right, trying to cover mortgage payments and have cash flow problems. And we're not sitting around with empty houses in summer going, gosh, I wish I had cash flow here because I've now got empty houses. And I think that's the biggest sin that we all complain about, right? If there's an empty bed, why isn't it being used? How can that be used? So it's not only providing beds, but also what do you use when those beds are actually there as well?
Thank you. I have some closing questions, but I think I actually want to give the council an opportunity to ask questions prior to that.
Yeah, we've got about 7-ish minutes. I know, obviously, this is a topic we could talk for hours, but there's so many cool things coming out of here. Really, really great stuff. But anyone have a burning question from him? Yes, there.
Mr. Chairman, talking about the prefab housing, and that makes a lot of sense. It's cheaper to buy prefab housing. It brings to mind the prison system in Iowa, and I don't know if you guys have looked at that, but it's homesforia.com. And so they build prefab housing at the prisons. So they have a Department of Labor registered apprenticeship for framing, electrical, plumbing. So they're training the inmates, building these houses, and they sell them super affordably. So it's $108,000, I think, for their biggest house, which is 3-bedroom, 2-bath. They deliver, the cost includes setting those on a foundation, $100,000 for 1,200 square foot house, while training the inmates through registered apprenticeship, so you're developing the workforce in addition. I know it's pie in the sky, but we would love to see something like that in Wyoming with our prison system. We piloted a plumbing apprenticeship program, but that's as far as it's gone so far. And there's success there, maybe we can introduce electrical, carpentry, and something similar. But for your needs, I think they would sell those prefab houses to you as well. Obviously, delivery costs would be more, and I cannot solve your land problem.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you can get our land price down too, that'd be helpful.
Sure, that just came to mind when you guys talked about
Yeah,
that.
sure.
We would, if something like that existed in our state, we all would prefer to invest in Wyoming. We all would prefer to invest in Wyoming than invest in the other states where we see these things.
Sure. There's other burning questions. Yes.
Understanding the oil and gas industry, we put up man camps. What I'm going to take back to the Oil Association for years is that rather than bringing in these temporary man camps that end up, and again, it depends on how the activity in the basin is. We've got 12 rigs up right now statewide. But as we ebb and flow, I think it would make great sense for my industry to work with the state on affordable housing. And rather than putting a man camp in and then picking it up and it goes onto a lot somewhere for 3 years, we can use that as a lever to put more housing in the communities where we need to do. Secondly, I would suggest, you guys are 97% of the land state owned. Notwithstanding the issue to the last one big beautiful bill where the BLM was going to auction off certain properties near houses, and that had to be pulled because of opposition. I would look at what the Department of Defense does with base realignment and closure conditions, because Navy Dallas, Grissom, all of these bases, the land is still owned by the federal government, by the Department of Defense, but they have a 99-year renewable for $1 until the sun burns out lease that can be used. If that's something that would work here in Jackson, where you could obtain a similar 99-year lease for the benefit of the park system, it might be worth looking at the DOD model as opposed to the BLM Department of Interior model.
We actually have 2 projects that are along those lines. One is in East Jackson, long-term lease with the Forest Service, but bringing in, so we've got Department of Ag, but also the Department of Interior. And one of our local nonprofit builders is working on that project on long-term lease, only a 30-year lease because the Fed won't give us a 99-year lease. That's an issue. So you can't get that 99-year lease. And then we actually have a retired admin site, it's a Forest Service admin site that now has about 300 homes on it. It was Himpala, it's a 10-acre site, and Forest Service sold that, and then they built their new headquarters right down the road from there.
What the risk of having the oil and gas industry take me out the back and shoot me. Doug Bergman is, we've got a lot on his plate, and BLM's got a lot on his plate, we don't have a director. But with this administration, on what's happened that 30-year, we should have more push from them, you know. I guess the last question I have is competition. When we talk about affordable housing, most people think about low-income affordable housing. When you bring up median income or other, have you encountered problems with the private sector coming in saying, this is unfair, the government's competing against me, and the government's taking money out of my pocket and through that in my mouth?
Yes. Yeah, I think we have, but I think that's, you know, where I say there's that rub.
Yeah.
Right? And, but I think we need that rub because everyone's, I can't fault people for trying to solve the problems. And for us, it's, you know, we look at other things like second mortgages, you know, paying people more, you know, relocation bonuses, but our problem is supply. We found that out during COVID. We pay people a small fortune bonus, they can't find something for themselves. And I think that, you know, yes, we as a private business hate people getting involved in what we've got going on. You know, we have obligations here. If we develop and grow things, we have mandated that we provide housing. But again, I know that I have to provide housing for more patient need. I think we're looking at the same thing, but with a different viewpoint. And that's where, you know, I think we share those particular outcomes on things. Like, this is frustrating as a private business because it's hard to operate out my business. It's now instead of being 2 layers, there's all these additional other layers. I think New Rochelle is probably a good example of how to combat that. If you look at New York, like, they've got a significant housing problem. New Rochelle sat down and said, how do we make it easy for people to get housing? And they said regulation has to be reduced, approval times have to be reduced, construction times have to be reduced, cost has to be reduced. Okay, how do we solve those things? They simplify that entire process, and people showed up to solve those housing problems.
I will say, you know, in the town of Jackson at least, we have reduced the time it takes to get a building permit significantly. You can go straight to building permit, which there are pluses and minuses to that too. I think people submit a building permit and realize that maybe they should have spent more time on the development plan before they go to the building permit. But you can cut about 9 months there. And again, I think it's the type of supply. Highest and best use in this valley is not to buy land and put a $100,000 home on there. This land costs too much. Our valley is owned by about 10 families, basically, that own most of the land in this valley. There's no reason, if I'm one of those families, I'm not gonna put a bunch of supply on the market, I'm gonna trickle it in. You know, and so there are a lot of opportunities I think that are working against us, which is why I think it's really healthy for us to lean into the healthy conflict, because I think that's where we get better. We start to sharpen our edges. Maybe it's, you know, whether it's, and Ty and I had this conversation as it relates to requalifications, with RD restrictions for your employees. How do we make it easier? We've got to make this easier for my team, for your team. It's got to be easier, and we have to be held accountable to the public elected officials, right? And so I think constantly being willing to engage in those conversations, because what worked 5 years ago, there's probably a better option today. And you just got to be willing to have a conversation.
Yeah, I know it's the same.
Yeah.
We all want people to be able to live, work, and play in Teton County.
That's right. I was just gonna say, thank you for bringing it up again, because I wanted to plus one the comment about, you know, the people that I describe as falling through the cracks. I want that kind of, as you're thinking about all of these different solutions, make sure that that's part of the equation, because we hear that all the time. I make too much to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough to actually live here. And those are, again, the nurses, the critical care techs, the people that are in that sort of middle spot are a lot of the ones that are providing those services.
We, in our county, we have different income ranges for affordable housing, and the state and federal programs have different income limits.
Right.
We actually created a new one this year. It's 120 to 160% of median income for those very people. If you're middle income, no kids, 2 teachers, you make 140% of median income. And that is, you work on your backs, but we are trying to be responsive to that. And again, we're lagging, we're not leading on that one. But it is in response to exactly what you just talked about, that the people who are getting squeezed, they can't get into the market. They make too much to get into affordable, so creating an extra opportunity for them. And we look to our peer communities who have had to do the same thing, the other high income communities.
We haven't solved all of the problems, by the way.
No.
But we've solved some of the problems, and I'll take that as a win. And I think, I know we're conscious of time, and here's what it means to do what we do. Last night I got a phone call at 8:30, and someone was on the phone crying, and I'm like, I couldn't understand what was going on. I'm like, calm down, like, I can't understand what's going on. After 2 minutes of trying to get this person to calm down, he said to me, I just want to let you know, Stacey Stoker, who's on April's student, who was working until 8 o'clock last night, called me up and said I had just got affordable housing, and he's been trying for 8 years to get into affordable housing. He had a problem, by the way, because his parents passed away. He had a house in Massachusetts or something that went into a family trust. The family trust is renting that place out, but the rent is paying off the mortgage. He doesn't make any income. But that, housing authority was saying, doesn't matter, that's income for you, but we'll work with you. What about this? What about that? Just got over the threshold, and he now has the choice to work with different employers. He is, it's a pressure off his back. Mental health is the biggest concern we have in our county, because the pressures of going to sleep and waking up. Is my landlord going to, sell this property for millions and millions of dollars, and I'm not going to have a place for my 2 kids? I went through that. That happened to me with 2 young children. And so, yes, so there are these amazing things that make humanity better, that make people better, that make our community better, and I think that's why we lean into the hard problems.
It's a great list to live off. So thank you.
Yes, give a round of applause, great. Talking about the top 3 most topics that even all the state chairs will talk about. It is healthcare, housing, child, and elder care. It is #1 across the whole country. So thank you, wonderful insights. And yeah, I'm sure you can share contact information if you want to reach out to, but a lot of really, I have tons of notes, a lot of really great takeaways. So great job on what you're doing here in Teton County, and yeah, I think we'll take a lot away from this, so thank you.
Thanks.
All right, well, yeah, lots of really good stuff. So our next topic for this morning's agenda is we're going to have Tom stay with us. So. And Tom is going to be joined by Christine. Is Christine here? Christine, oh, Sure, yeah. All right, so our next section, yes, is we're going to be hearing from Tom and Christy regarding the IET program that Central Wyoming College has with St. John's Hospital. So, who should I hand out to Tom or Start. Go. Yeah, who are you?
Do we have the slides?
Yep.
So this is gonna be fun because Tom and I have not talked in like over years. Yeah. I actually have a program manager for this who is in Peru right now, teaching for the State Department. So, an IET, we're working with St. John's on an IET IELCE. I'm going to explain what both of those are. So if you'll go to the next slide. And just to introduce myself, my name is Christy Piles, and I'm the Director of College and Career Readiness for CWC. And that puts me in charge of the ESL programs, which is the second language programs, and what people refer to as the GED programs, but in Wyoming is actually the ISEP program. So, anyway, so I cover all of our area for CWC, which includes Jackson to Thermopolis. So we actually have the widest demographic of any college or any program in the state of Wyoming. In terms of income, population density, and employment issues. So, and I'm going to just say really quickly that I really identify with the conversation you guys are having because I worked for education in Idaho, where I was in a community bordering Sun Valley, and I worked for a university in New Mexico, where I was bordering Santa Fe. So these are issues that are not just here, but I think that it's issues that affect me as a program director in terms of my employee here in Jackson actually makes, I think, as much money as I do by the time I add her housing addition. And that housing addition is one of the smallest of any agency in the area. So we get a lot of issues with hiring people. I lost an employee a couple of years ago to Target because Target could pay more than I could pay. So, because it's a state college, what I can pay is limited to our criteria, and it's just not set up for a community like Jackson. So anyway, back to what we have with the hospital is an IET, which is an integrated education training program. And this is an opportunity for businesses and adult education programs to address skill gaps in the local workforce by providing incentivized job training. So this can be training for either a whole new career, or it can be training for new credentials so that your employee can move up within your organization or gain new skills to help your company move forward as you train your own employees, and then you don't have to go outside trying to attract new employees. So, next slide. So common IET programs, this is a list of them. You'll notice that CNA is at the very top, and that's what we're doing right now with St. John's. I'm going to also tell you that you can tell I have gray hair, and I've been in rehab and adult education for most of my career. And I started out with this in the 80s, only we called it on-the-job training. And at that time, the top careers were I was developing meat wrapper with agencies, wastewater treatment operator, and I also had CAD operators, a really popular one, where I was working with employers to train my clients in those areas. And I can say that when I did that, all of my clients were hired by the employer before they finished their training. So it's very good at bringing in someone and bringing them up who might have the base skills that you want, but isn't quite there yet. You bring them in on this training capacity and then move them up. And you can partner, either do that within your agency itself, or you can partner as the hospital has done with a college, community college, or a training school. So this is getting to be more and more popular, and in the state of Wyoming, all of the adult education programs are now required to have at least one IET. So, and I'll talk about what we have. So we can go to the next slide. So the advantages to employers of sponsoring an IET are adaptability and agility. So it lets you adapt to changes within your business. So if there's a new tool coming out, a new regulation that people have to adapt to, you can use IETs to train up your own employees to move into those positions and take care of that. It allows you as a company to be much more adaptive.
I'm walking to the firehouse, I'm gonna go there.
Sorry.
We need some high contrast text.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
So it enhances your competitiveness as an employer. It allows you to compete. It goes along with that adaptability. You know, I once worked for a corporation as one of my other side career was I was a sales rep for 15 years. Independently, I worked for a lot of different corporations. And one of my favorite companies that I worked for, he always told me I'd rather be a smaller company than a large company because I'm more maneuverable. I don't have to change everything to maneuver my ship. It allows me, I'm not a big ocean liner, I'm a tugboat, and I can move, be more adaptable. And so IETs let me do that. It also strengthens your company brand. It shows that you are supporting your employees and you care about your employees. I don't know if any of you have read the works of Rifkin. He has a book that I actually worked with my master's degree on years ago, which is called The End of Work, and it talks about what we're facing right now with employment, where people are no longer in the same career for 20 years. They're moving around, changing careers, changing employers, and it's seen, companies are not seen as supporting their employees anymore. So this helps you be seen as supporting your employees. So next slide. So the benefits of an IET for, as I've talked about, for the employer mainly, are you build that talent pipeline within your own organizations and bring people up. You improve your employee retention. You attract top talent. That came up again and again and again in the literature that people are looking for companies that provide IETs. It increases productivity in your own performance, your employees. It reduces your training costs because you're not having to bring in a new employee. You're not having to go through that period of time without an employee you're trying to cover. You're training somebody up from within. And it reduces your supervision time because you've got employees who know how the company operates. And your instruction can occur within your place of business. You don't have to let that employee go. You know, one of my sisters-in-law is a nurse, and she went to get her wound care specialty, and it was a 3-month certification where she had to leave her employer and go to Georgia to college and get that certification. So for the student, it improves their job readiness and their workforce skills, whether that's just getting that certificate or moving into a whole new career. It increases their employability, be that with you or with another employer. It enhances their confidence because they feel not only that they're valued by their employer, it helps them feel more confident about themselves and what they're learning. It improves your civic engagement and knowledge, so it shows that the employer is committed to the community. They're not just bringing in people from outside continually, they're committed to their own community. It accesses support networks for your company. It lets your employees be more flexible in their career choices. We see that a lot in Amazon's program. If you hear about that, where they actually allow employees to come in and train for other jobs than what they entered for. faster transition into the workforce. So there's a lot of benefits both for the employer and for the student. Next slide. So these are actually companies that support IATs that are major companies around the country that are known for it. And St. John's and this IUT are actually the only employer-based IUT in the state of Wyoming. So this is something that Wyoming can work on, and we could really develop to help with this housing problem, with the employer shortage, with employee shortages. Next. So in the first slide, I talked about IETs and IELCE. So the difference is that IELCE is working specifically with integrated English language training. It's an IET that works with people who have English as a second language, which is what we're doing with St. John's. The key features of that are that it focuses on career-specific English skills, which is something we found is very important. It incorporates civics education and career pathways. It's blending language and job readiness training, and it's working on workforce development and transitional support. So how this comes about is, as an employer, St. John's did a needs analysis or recognized that they had a need, which was they had a significant need and an ongoing need to improve the communication among their non-English speaking employees. So that was their identified target, was the non-native English speakers. And in that group, they were also, because of that language barrier, were also their low-skilled, no-skilled employees that came in those entry-level jobs and stayed there. So they sought out us. Tom and I met, I think, my first month on the job. I don't know if you knew that, through Susan Murphy. And so he mentioned to me that he had this dream, and it took me a year to find funding to do this. And then I came back to him and said, okay, we've got this funding, we've got right now I've got like 1 month to get this grant written. So what I had to do in that process was to look at what Tom needed, what were the jobs that he needed to fulfill. So the jobs that he told me he needed to fulfill were childcare, CNA, medical assistant, phlebotomist.
I think surgical tech. Maybe?
Surgical tech.
Yeah, or sterile processing.
Sterile processing.
Sterile processing.
So what I had to do is then look at the labor market of what was the future of those jobs in Wyoming. Was it a growth area? Was it paying a sustainable living wage, which is the term that the federal government uses, and that just means will it pay the individual and their family a livable wage within the community in which the job exists. So therefore, we had to ask out childcare, because childcare in Jackson and in Wyoming was not a growth occupation unless you were a manager. So, and we couldn't say we were training everybody to be a manager. So, and then, I'm gonna go back to your earlier discussion, we still wanted to do a variety of occupations. We ended up with CNA because CWC could not get teachers for all the other occupations that we had on that list. And so actually what happened was my program manager instructor for this program is a long-time Jackson resident. And so she went to her circle of friends and recruited a nurse to teach the CNA course. So, and that took us 2 years to do, 2 years to find a CNA instructor. So, and that's that housing issue and bringing people in. So, we ended up with CNA, and we had to then create the curriculum for the whole program, and we had to kind of create it from scratch, because Wyoming has their own requirements for CNA. So, if you go to the next slide. So these are some things that we learned that I tell other people to look for. You need to establish clear expectations. So I don't think Tom knew, because we were working in a big hurry, I don't think Tom knew exactly what I needed, and I didn't know exactly what Tom needed. We just had this general idea that we both had a dream. And it intersected in some places, and I don't think it intersected in other places. You have to have buy-in, and you have to have buy-in from the employer, and you have to have buy-in from the organization providing your training. And you have to have all of those expectations put in writing so that you both clearly understand what's going on. And when I say from that, and I'm going to go into more of this later, I, on my part, did not have buy-in from all of my deans at the college. They were somewhat insulted by this idea that I could work outside of the college curriculum and come in, so that was kind of threatening to them. And I don't think Tom, excuse me for saying this, had total buy-in from all his supervisors. They weren't quite sure what was going on. So this is, and all of that was due to the fact that we were working on a tight timeline to get this program together. Your program has to have employee incentives. That can be looking at their entry-level job and where their career pathway will take them. Implement employer incentives. Do they get a pay raise when they go past certain levels, when they learn different things? Are they going to get a slight pay raise when they move up to a certain achievement partway through the program? Are they going to get a better shift? You know, can they move from night shift to day shift? What are some benefits they can get? You have to understand the reality and the time commitments of that reality. We did not know going into this. The funding actually was structured for a one-year training program. We quickly found out that due to the English language barriers, we were at a minimum of 2-year program. So, because it took at least a year to bring an intermediate person up to the level of competence to be able to understand the training, actually, and give them medical terminology. And then we also need someone who needs a company liaison to work between the trainer and the company, because as a trainer coming in a training organization, I don't know the ins and outs of your company. I don't know the culture. I don't know who to see, because every organization has their own culture and their own structure. So you need somebody within your company who's enthused about the program and can help your trainer navigate through that. Hopefully I'm not setting your notes. So
That's great.
the
We
next,
got 5
huh?
5 minutes.
Okay. So the demographic in this program is quite different than what people expect. You can see that the age range goes up mainly 45 to 55, 25 to 44. And if you go to the next slide. This is also something that people don't expect. If you look at this, this is a very typical look at ESL students around the state of Wyoming. So you'll see that there are a lot of post-secondary degrees and going through grade 12 and high school credentials. We actually have people with doctorates who come into our program. One gentleman I remember meeting was a nurse, professor of nursing from South America that came. Another was an attorney who came just to learn English better for a year. Next. So what's happened in the last 2 years is we have people now this year who have earned their CNA certification. They've also used a computer skills certification. That was the first thing we had to add to the program. We found out that a lot of the people in there did not know how to use a computer, and as with a lot of companies, communication was through email. And email, they didn't know how to use email, so they were having to go to their supervisor and find out what the company wanted them to do, which led to a lot of misunderstandings. So the first thing we added and started with was a computer skills certificate. And then we also added a global certificate on Windows Basics. The program resulted in a 74% retention rate, a median quarterly earning increase. We also had in addition to the CNA, we also had one of the people in the program move up to the surgical tech that you mentioned. So one of our people did move up into that. And then we had a 75% skill level gain and advanced digital literacy skills. And the students went into that dietary aid position, sterile processing technician, nursing, and the OR sterile processing. So what we're looking at this year is we're adding a second IET with our hospitality program here in Jackson, which is a ServSafe certification, which will help generally with the hospitality industry. Certification that's recognized within the industry for all hospital or any food service organization. And then in addition, our high school students will have a customer service micro credential. So if your organization is interested in it, I would encourage you to look at with Wyoming Workforce Services Department. There's a whole list of grants and programs they have that lead into this. CWC certainly has a workforce development person, and I think most of the community colleges do, so you can reach out to your local community college for that. And I'll leave it 2 minutes to talk.
Okay, I can do that. So, I think I'll just add, I opened my previous conversation about housing talking about the nature of healthcare as requiring high levels of skills and education and certifications and licensing that don't necessarily exist. And what I didn't say, but I love this sort of transition, is the other alternative, if you're not importing it from other states, is to grow it right here and upskill your employees and train staff who maybe already have roots to the community, already have housing. If I can increase their skills and enable them to progress their career and stay here at St. John's, that is a huge win. And CWC has been a tremendous partner, not just in this program, but in their nursing training over the years. I've been here. One of the first connections I made, I think, 9 years ago was with CWC. And so, we've had some hiccups in this. You mentioned buy-in from supervisors, like the lesson learned there. When we first started the program, one of the questions was, well, who can participate? And my answer was, well, everybody. Like, let's get as many people as possible, because that's sufficient. We'll train them up. And my supervisor's like, I still need people to actually do the work. And so we did build it very quickly. It was kind of building the plane while we were flying it. But overall, I mean, you saw the results there, and knowing that, number one, people are like, we're better leveraging the talent in our organization. People are finding career paths. And we're better able to serve our community as well. A significant portion of Jackson's population are Spanish speakers, and if I can have a nurse who can speak to them directly in their native language, that enhances the quality of their care and their patient experience, which is, again, that's our mission. So to me, that's a win. So thank you.
And I will say one of the people that got a CNA was actually in nurse training in Mexico when she had to move to the US to help. Yeah. So she was to be back on her original work.
That's great. Thank you, Christy and Tom. I think we have time for one question from council. We'll ask Tom and Christy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan Wetzel from Rock Springs. I'm curious, you mentioned that there was a state or federal grant. does the hospital put in towards the program and how much does the grant?
So the grant covers, this was an ARPA, a federal ARPA grant. We're in our last year right now of the grant. The grant covered the cost of, basically the cost of the instructor, the cost of paying for the class, and the cost of tuition and fees for the employees who were in the training.
Yeah, so essentially, the only thing that St. John's paid was, and this was a decision point, we had to talk about, like, is this something we're asking our employees to do outside of work on their own time because it benefits their career, or is this something we're going to pay them for, in many cases paying them overtime because they're sticking around to complete the training? We made the decision to pay them so that there was no barrier to them completing this training. So that's the only cost of the organization.
Yes.
What are the demographics of companies or businesses that would fit well in the program? Like outside of the hospital, are there?
In setting these up throughout my career, I worked with the federal government. I worked with, in terms of military, I worked with prisons. I have worked with small independent organizations, small local grocery stores. So it's as broad as you want to make it. In this instance, for this funding to set this up, the limit of the grant was it had to be an employer that could hire at least 15 people per year. So that made us face a serious limitation. There are very few employers that do that.
Well, again, thank you, Christine, and thank you, Tom, for joining us today. So, once again, another really great conversation. Great start to the morning. We're going to go ahead and move to a 15-minute break. Let's go ahead and reconvene at 10:30. Just be ready, your seats at 10:30 to jump back in. morning. Really amazing topics. We're going to talk about those, like I mentioned, for hours. I think these are conversations, like I mentioned, taking back to communities, a lot of aha moments for myself. The last part of our day 2 to kick us off on the agenda. We're going to do our Wyoming Workforce Annual Report, and it's going to be presented by our own Michael Moore from Research and Planning at GWS. So, Michael, are you with us?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, I am here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Great, great. Jennifer, would you like me to share my screen, or would you like to run it from your end?
You can go.
All right. Let me give me just 1 second. All right. And are you able to see my screen? And
Yep, everything looks good. Thanks, Michael.
right. Perfect. Mr. Chairman, members of council, thanks again. Good morning. My name is Michael Moore. I am the research supervisor for RMP. Thanks again for giving me the time today to talk to you about a little bit about our 2025 Wyoming Workforce Annual Report, which is something that RMP does in cooperation with the council every year. This report is really an excellent resource and something to go back to if you need to quickly find answers to any questions that may arise about labor market information. Just a little bit about research and planning for some people who may be a little unaware of what we do. We are an exclusively statistical entity within GWS. We collect, analyze, and publish timely labor market information data, LMI. We provide this information to the public, legislators, educators, training providers, the media, and more. Each year, we publish a Wyoming Workforce Annual Report in conjunction with the council. The 2025 issue was just published in June, and this is really a great overview of all the work that RMP does during the year. This publication is available at the URL on this slide, and there's also a link at the top of our main page. And this presentation will serve as an overview to the annual report, look at some of the highlights. There are also a few images in this presentation that were taken from other presentations or publications that did not appear in the annual report. To begin with, we'll look at Chapter 2, which looks at employment and wages using data from the Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, or QCEW. The data in this chapter show that from 2023 to 2024, Wyoming added more than 3,100 jobs, which is a 1.1% increase. Total wages increased by more than $892 million, a 5.4% increase. And the state's average annual wage was $61,586, up 4.2% over the year. I'll be talking about periods of economic downturn during this presentation, and this graphic will help you visualize what I'm talking about. Shaded boxes represent periods of economic downturn. There are 2 of them in this particular graphic: second quarter 2015 to fourth quarter 2016, and then second quarter 2020 to first quarter 2021. RMP defines an economic downturn as at least 2 consecutive quarters of over-the-year decline in average monthly employment and total wages based on data from the QCEW. This figure shows over-the-year percent changes in employment and total wages from first quarter 2014 to fourth quarter 2024. The green line, which is the darker one on here, represents over-the-year change in annual employment. And you can really see how the downturn in 2015 and 2016 was more prolonged. That's this the larger box to the left here. In the 2020 downturn, which is associated with the pandemic and declining energy prices, we saw a sharp drop in employment at the start, but it didn't last quite as long. And you can see how growth has slowed in the most recent quarters since the pandemic, but is still positive. This figure shows Wyoming's average monthly employment from first quarter 2014 to fourth quarter 2024. The thin green line represents average monthly employment, so you can see the ups and downs showing changes from one quarter to the next. Employment increases from first to second quarter and then peaks during the third quarter, which is July, August, and September. We then typically see a decrease in jobs from third quarter to fourth quarter as many of those seasonal summer jobs go away. The thicker blue line in this graphic is a 4-quarter moving average, which allows us to more easily identify trends over time. You can see in this figure how employment has grown consistently since the end of the most recent downturn, but it did take us a while to get back to pre-COVID employment levels. QCEW data provide us with job growth by industry. In 2024, the greatest over-the-year job growth was seen in industries like construction, with more than 1,200 new jobs or 5.7% growth. Healthcare and social assistance with more than 400 new jobs, 1.6% growth. And professional and business services with 368 jobs or 1.7% growth. It is worth pointing out, however, that Wyoming's mining sector lost more than 1,000 jobs over the year or 6.1%. And some of that change in mining is due to some recent non-economic code changes, but we did also see pretty substantial job losses in mining. Data from the QCEW show us which industries had the highest annual wages in 2024. The overall average wage in Wyoming was $61,586. Mining, which includes oil and gas, had the highest wage with $106,695, followed by federal government with $88,949, professional and business services with $85,412, and financial activities with $84,915. This figure shows average monthly employment in mining in Wyoming for first quarter 2014 to fourth quarter 2024. And you can really see in this graphic how mining drops drastically during those periods of economic downturn, which are often preceded by declining energy prices and demand. As I said before, mining lost more than 1,000 jobs from 2023 to 2024, which is this dip in the graphic right here. Part of those job losses were due to some jobs being reclassified to a different ownership, while the others were actual job losses. This figure shows employment in Wyoming's construction sector from first quarter 2014 to fourth quarter 2024. Once again, the thin green line shows the average monthly employment with the ups and downs by quarter, while the blue line is a four-quarter moving average. You can see the consistent growth in construction employment since the end of the pandemic, which is this area over here, particularly in 2023 and 2024. In the last several quarters, construction has driven Wyoming job growth. Another industry that's seen substantial job growth is professional and business services. And you can really see, especially since the end of this downturn from the pandemic, how much employment has increased in this industry. And these are the largest employment numbers we have ever seen in this particular sector. So what exactly is professional and business services? Some of our industry titles are self-explanatory, like mining, construction, or healthcare, but this one's a little different. Professional and business services is a super sector made up of three sectors: professional and technical services, management of companies and enterprises, and administrative and waste services. So what does all that mean? The industry supersector includes businesses involved in things like temporary employment staffing, computer systems designs, legal services, architectural and engineering services, and a whole lot more. QCEW also provides us with employment and wage data by county. The counties with the greatest job gains from 2023 to 2024 were Laramie County with 718, a 1.5% increase. Natrona with 555, a 1.4% increase. Teton with 377, Albany with 355, and Sheridan with 292. QCEW also allows us to compare job growth in Wyoming and surrounding states. As I mentioned, Wyoming's average monthly employment increased by 1.1% from 2023 to 2024. And this really wasn't a whole lot different from most of our surrounding states. Idaho had the greatest increase in employment at 1.8% over the year, while Colorado had the smallest at 0.5%. We'll move on to Chapter 3, which looks at population estimates from the U.S. Census Bureau. Wyoming's population in 2024 was 587,618. If we look at this graphic, we can see how Wyoming's population has increased since the pandemic. Again, these two boxes mark those periods of economic downturn. So you can really see the increase here since the pandemic. The population was up about 1,900 people, or 0.4% compared to 2023. Population was up about 1.5% or almost 9,000 people compared to pre-pandemic levels of 2019, which was 578,759. And then if we look finally over the 10 years from 2014 to 2024, Wyoming's population increased by 5,087 people or 0.9%. This figure from Chapter 3 shows population change from 2019 to 2024. The blue counties saw increases in population while the red counties saw decreases. There were 14 counties with population decreases, with the greatest percentage decreases seen in Sublette with 11.7%, and Carbon, which was down 10.2%. The greatest percentage increases were seen in Lincoln with 13.1% and Sheridan with 10.5%. Chapter 4 focuses on data from the Local Area Unemployment Statistics Program, or LAUS. And LAUS data include the labor force, the number of employed, the number of unemployed, and the unemployment rate. We can see here that the total labor force increased from 296,385 in 2023 to 296,715 in 2024. And since 2021, we've seen pretty consistent increases in the workforces and the number of individuals employed. The number of unemployed individuals in 2023 was 8,639, which was the lowest amount since 2007. That number of unemployed individuals went up to 9,598 in 2024, which was still lower than at any point in the last 10 years. The unemployment rate increased from 2.9% to 3.2%. So to sum this up, we've seen some recent increases in the labor force and the number of employed individuals, which are both higher than pre-pandemic levels from 2018 and 2019. In case you're wondering, Wyoming's most recent seasonally adjusted unemployment rate was 3.3% for June 2025. This figure from Chapter 4 provides a visualization of the data that I just talked about. The black line represents the labor force, and you can see how it's increased since 2021. The yellow bars represent the unemployment rate, and you can see the slight increase from 2023 to 2024. And you can see that in 2020, during the pandemic, we had an unemployment rate of almost 6%. Moving on to Chapter 5, that chapter looks at annual unemployment insurance claims data, such as the number of UI benefit recipients and the total amount of benefits paid. In 2024, Wyoming had 10,972 UI benefit recipients. That was up over the year by 512 individuals, or 5.9%. The average exhaustion rate of people who exhausted their benefits was 18.1%, which was up a little bit compared to 17.2% in 2023. The average number of weeks claimed in 2024 was 10.3, which was unchanged from the prior year. And finally, Wyoming UI paid out $51.7 million in benefit expenses in 2024, up by $6.5 million, or 14.4% over the year. This figure shows the total number of UI benefit recipients in Wyoming for each year from 1997 to 2024. Once again, the shaded boxes represent those economic downturns. This one goes back a bit further. So we also had the downturn from 2009 to 2010, which occurred during the National Great Recession. You can also see how the number of UI benefit recipients spiked during each of those economic downturns as jobs were lost. In 2020, Wyoming had 43,630 individuals receiving UI benefits, which marked the largest number of UI benefit recipients dating back to at least 1997, which is the first year for which we have comparable data. But you can see that from 2022 to 2024, Wyoming had historically low numbers of UI benefit recipients. Chapter 6 looks at some demographics of Wyoming's workforce, which was accomplished by linking data from several of our administrative databases. These numbers represent individuals working in Wyoming at any time during the year, whether that's one day or all 4 quarters. In 2024, there were 351,812 unique individuals working in Wyoming, which was up slightly over the year, 786 more individuals. In 2024, 44.2% of all people working in Wyoming were males, and 39.2% were females. The remaining 16.6% were non-residents, which refers to individuals that we do not have demographic data for. It's important to understand what we mean when we talk about non-residents. Non-residents are often people who commute to Wyoming from other states or countries for temporary jobs in industries like construction and leisure and hospitality. For example, a person who comes to Wyoming from Colorado for a construction job in the summer could be considered a non-resident. would be considered non-resident, excuse me. But non-residents may also be individuals who moved to Wyoming but haven't yet obtained a Wyoming driver's license. Again, non-residents often work jobs in seasonal industries like construction and leisure and hospitality. In 2024, non-residents accounted for about 1/3 of all individuals working in construction and leisure and hospitality. Figure 7.2 on page 42 of the annual report shows the change in the number of people working in Wyoming from 2000 to 2024 by age. We can see downward trends for most of these age groups over the last several years. If we focus just on the top green line here, we can see a pretty drastic drop in the number of 25 to 34-year-olds working in Wyoming since 2014. This is consistent with some studies, including some of our own, that have shown a substantial decline in younger workers in Wyoming over the last 10 years. You can really see how this age group accounted for the largest share of Wyoming's workforce from 2007 until about 2016 and has declined since then. Since about 2018, individuals 55 and older have made up the greatest proportion of Wyoming's workforce, which is this red line on the graphic here. You can see consistent growth in this age from 2000 to 2015 as more and more baby boomers moved into this age range. We see a pretty consistent decline in this age group since 2019, which you can see here. This is likely due to a lot of factors, including older workers retiring, leaving the workforce, or moving out of state. Finally, if we zoom in on this dashed line, this thick black line here, this represents non-residents. And we can see a substantial increase in non-residents working in Wyoming each year since 2000. There are a variety of factors at work here. One, because of the large number of younger workers leaving the state, Wyoming employers may have turned to more out-of-state workers to fill jobs. Two, some of these are individuals who have moved to Wyoming but haven't yet obtained a Wyoming driver's license. As we obtain new data over the next few years, we will have more information on some of these non-residents, and more of them will be moved into other age groups. Chapter 7 looks at educational attainment in Wyoming and the U.S. by using data from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey. For example, in 2023, Wyoming had a greater percentage of individuals with a high school diploma or higher compared to the U.S., 94.1% to 89.4%. However, Wyoming trailed the national average when it came to individuals with a bachelor's degree or higher, 29.9% to 35%. In other words, we have a greater percentage of the population with a high school diploma, but a smaller percentage of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher compared to the national average. Chapter 7 also looks at the difference in educational attainment between males and females in Wyoming. In 2023, females were more likely to have a high school diploma or higher, 94.7% to 93.5%. In addition, females were more likely to have a bachelor's degree or higher, 31.5% to 28.4%. Chapter 8 looks at long-term industry and occupational projections for 2022 to 2032. These projections show Wyoming adding 35,000 new jobs over that 10-year period. Beginning with industry projections, leisure and hospitality is projected to add the greatest number of jobs with 6,200. Healthcare and social assistance is projected to add 4,600 new jobs, and construction is projected to add 4,000 new jobs. Chapter 8 also discusses R&P's most recent long-term occupational projections. Occupational projections provide us with even more detail as we're able to look at projected openings not just due to growth or new jobs, but also exits, which are people leaving Wyoming's workforce. These could be people retiring, moving, or leaving the workforce to go back to school or to care for a family member. We also have openings due to transfers or people changing occupations. These may be people getting a promotion or changing careers. Total openings refers to the sum of all of these openings, growth, exits, and transfers. In occupational projections, growth is just a small part of the total projected openings. Occupational projections also provide the level of education, experience, and on-the-job training typically required to enter that occupation, excuse me. Table 8.2 on page 48 of the annual report shows the top 10 occupations with the greatest number of total projected openings. Again, this is transfers, growth, and exits. This table is an excerpt of that and shows the top 5 occupations. If we zoom in, for example, just on heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers, which is highlighted in this slide, projections show that this occupation will grow from 6,577 in 2022 to 7,752 in 2032. That's 1,175 new jobs, a change of 17.2%, 118 openings per year. In addition to that, we're projected to see 3,243 openings due to exits and 4,197 openings due to transfers. And that gives a total opening of 8,615 jobs for this occupation. This is an occupation that typically requires a post-secondary non-degree award or a certificate, no experience, and short-term on-the-job training. Overall, as shown in figure 8.1 on page 49, our long-term occupational projections show 379,470 total job openings in Wyoming from 2022 to 2032. And you can see that the vast majority of those require a high school diploma or equivalent, 39%, or no formal education, 34.3%. Together, those two groups make up nearly 3/4 of all projected job openings. Occupations requiring a bachelor's degree make up 13.4% of the total, and jobs requiring a post-secondary non-degree award or some college and no degree make up 9.1%. Chapter 9 looks at STEM occupations in Wyoming based on data from the Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics Program, or OEWS, and our long-term occupational projections. STEM, as I'm sure most of you are aware, stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has identified more than 100 STEM occupations. Wyoming data were available for about 80 of those. In 2022, there were 18,156 STEM jobs in Wyoming, making up 6.2% of all jobs. STEM jobs tend to have higher wages than many other jobs, and almost all of those require some sort of post-secondary education. Projections data indicate that Wyoming will outpace the U.S. in STEM job growth from 2022 to 2032. Wyoming STEM jobs are projected to grow at a rate of 15.3% compared to 9.8% for the U.S. But it is important to keep in mind that despite this accelerated growth, there are still a relatively low number of STEM jobs in Wyoming. In addition, OEWS data show that STEM jobs in Wyoming tend to be lower paying than in the U.S. or many other surrounding states. As an example, figure 9.1 on page 55 of the annual report shows hourly wages for software developers in the U.S., Wyoming, and surrounding states. The average hourly wage for software developers in Wyoming was $61.44 in May 2023. This is higher than in states like Nebraska and South Dakota, but it is noticeably lower than the national average of $66.40 per hour and the average wage of $69.92 in Colorado. Chapter 10 looks at data from our annual benefits survey. We collect data on benefits on a quarterly basis and publish a report on the findings each year. This report looks at the number of employers offering benefits and the number of employees offered benefits. This includes benefits such as medical insurance, paid leave, a retirement plan, etc. We have very detailed information available at levels like employer size, industry, and sub-state region, and for full and part-time jobs. Our survey shows that about 2/3 of Wyoming employees were offered insurance and a retirement plan. A smaller percentage, about 37%, were offered paid sick leave. Chapter 11 looks at data from our Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics Program, or OEWS. These data are updated in March and September and published twice each year. The OEWS program gives us data on employment estimates by occupation, hourly wage, annual wage, and more. This information is available at the industry, state, and sub-state region levels. For this particular chapter, one of our statisticians looked at OEWS data for healthcare occupations, and he looked at how employment changed in healthcare occupations in Wyoming from 2013 to 2023. Overall, during that time, Wyoming lost over 5,000 jobs total, or 1.9% of its total employment, but many healthcare jobs saw substantial job growth. Home health and personal care aides increased by more than 1,000 jobs, or 45.4%. Medical and health services managers increased by 320 jobs, or 46.4%. And nurse practitioners increased by 250 jobs, or 113.6%. Chapter 12 looks at data from our Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries, or CFOI. In 2023, Wyoming had 45 workplace fatalities, up from 34 in 2022. 2/3 of those were in transportation incidents. At the industry level, 17 were in natural resources and mining. This figure shows the number of occupational fatalities in Wyoming from 2013 to 2023. You can see that the 45 we had in 2023 was the highest number at any time during that period. You can see the lowest was in 2017 when we only had 20 occupational fatalities. Chapter 13 also focuses on occupational safety and health with data from the Survey of Occupational Injuries and Illnesses, or the SOI. And the SOI is published annually and collects information only on workplace injuries that result in days away from work. So for example, if you had a paper cut and just got a Band-Aid, that's not counted as an occupational injury. The SOI gives us information on the number of incidents, type of incidents, and incidence rate, or the number of incidents per 100 full-time workers. There were 2,600 workplace injuries that resulted in days away from work in 2023. The incidence rate for Wyoming private industry was 2.7, while the incidence rate for US private industry was 2.4. This graphic shows the 5 industry subsectors with the highest incidence rate in Wyoming in 2023. Wood product manufacturing had an incidence rate of 10.3, and nursing and residential care facilities had a rate of 8.6. And again, as a reminder, Wyoming's overall incidence rate for private industry in 2023 was 2.7. With that, I will go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak here today and look over the report with you. I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, a lot of numbers, and if you have any questions, you need any assistance or anything, my contact information is on this slide, and feel free to reach out at any time.
Source data to address just the reason behind all this noise. Any council discussion on who's allowed to stop to?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Real quick question, Mike. Page 14, you talk about the oil and gas and mining numbers being shifted because of a non-economic code change. Was that driven by NACS, or was that driven by something that we did internally?
I have to be careful how I say this because I can't identify an individual employer, but as an example, if we had a retail store that was private industry and then was taken over by a local county, was bought by a local county and run, that would be moved from private industry into local government. And so something similar happened in natural resources and mining. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Sorry for being vague there. I just we have to be careful how we say that.
No, that gives me the answer.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Tom, any other? Let's get it.
Mr. Chairman, I always get curious what is the responsibility of the district to use the data? Like, I'm really particularly interested in the demand for CDL drivers, knowing that there's a lack of CDL drivers in the state. So, like, what's our responsibility to use the data to make decisions that are going to successes business leaders in the community?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a fantastic question we have. These numbers are so important, you know, when we're going to like grant funding and what we should be focusing on. I do agree, probably an opportunity for this council moving forward. How do we take this, how do we make it tangible, and setting some real specific goals, both short-term and long-term for the council, to look at these and then come up with strategies around it. So I agree, I think we could do better in that space. Yeah, any other council discussion or questions for Michael?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm all for leading the way, but the 16 deaths per 100,000 workers in Wyoming, we consistently lead the way. In that category, when the national average is 3.7 per 100,000. As workforce, is there anything we can do to help shine a light on the number and help, bring that number down?
Yeah, anyone want to weigh in? Yeah.
I'll just chime in and say there's been a lot of conversations about what can be done, and there's a lot of groups that are working on different efforts. So I will say that transportation incidents are the biggest part of that number in Wyoming. So if somebody's traveling for work on I-80, we know how treacherous that is. They get in a car crash, that counts as a workplace death. And so that's different than some other states, not excusing it, but I'm just saying that there's that highway safety coalition that works on that piece of it. And I think being engaged in those conversations across the state, whether it's that specifically or it's workplace, you know, workplace safety is everybody's problem. And being able to figure out at what level you can be engaged and what those statistics actually mean for your community and for the workplaces in your community and you know, how that can be impacted is probably the biggest impact that we can all have individually. But yeah, there's been a lot of conversation around that recently, so.
Thanks. I'm glad you brought that up, because there was something else that's as well.
Well, there's a lot of talk about money for training for these businesses too, safety and training, but there's never any talk about if they actually implement it. I know there's a lot of companies out there that have training, safety training programs, and they don't do it. So it's a problem. Another thing is the accountability. Is if these guys aren't following the rules legally, or you know, you're having fatalities on job sites, some of these guys need to be held accountable. And maybe even not allowed to work in the state.
Yeah, like workplace safety is utmost importance, right? Gotta make sure, and Wyoming does have a lot of injuries that are kind of high risk, you know, so you probably just see a little bit higher than the national average there, so, yeah.
But if we continue to bring in the same companies that we're having these problems with, these fatalities with, I mean, we can't really expect it to change, right? That's on everybody's mind. We want that number to go down. We don't want to be the state. You know, I know a lot of those do happen on the highways, like Lauren was talking about, a ton of them. It's the highway, you know, just people not knowing to not pull a light camper down you know, we get incredible winds in Wyoming, and who would have knew they'd make campers and trucks fly enough where you would have to worry about them blowing over and killing people on our highways. But
yeah, all of our elevation changes, as well as our weather, makes Wyoming a difficult state to travel, which is why we decided our Q1 meetings, just trying to get you all safely to these meetings in January, between February, Thanks again, Mike. And definitely wish you might if you want to kind of dig deeper into numbers. I think everyone, we had the physical package delivered, right? Physical packets for this?
Yeah, the actual annual report is
Yeah, so if you want to actually, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, how many pages is it? 150, lots of pages. Like, if you really want to know all the data that's sort of driving Wyoming and our workforce, it's in there. So, gotta get wrapped into an AI, for sure. Great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time and all of your efforts that you put into these reports.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and moving on to our next agenda item, it's our one-stop performance report, and our presenters today will be Christina West and Trevor Mansfield. So, Christina, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I will be presenting today with Trevor, so we just both want to thank you for allowing us this time today. We really want to carry on the theme that Dave Welling started yesterday. So today we want to highlight the power of collaboration and the real impact our programs have here in Wyoming.
You're about to watch a powerful success video from the Work Initiative Network, also known as WIN. WIN is a unique partnership between the Wyoming Child Support Program and DWS, designed to support non-custodial parents in overcoming barriers, gaining employment, and meeting their family responsibilities.
One of the things that make this story really special is that you will see that this individual is also co-enrolled in other DWS programs, including Weimar Kaiser Employment Services. So WIN participants are consistently co-enrolled in other DWS programs, including Dads Make a Difference, DVR, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. By leveraging these DWS programs, we ensure that participants not only receive employment support, but they have access to education, training, family services, and really wraparound resources. So the collaborative model strengthens our outcomes and it provides participants with comprehensive support so that they can achieve stability and overall independence. The video you're about to watch not only shows the determination of the participant, which is most important, but also shows what's possible when agencies come together to provide that truly integrative support. So I'm going to turn it over to Trevor to cue up the video, and we can see firsthand what the right support at the right time can really change somebody's life.
I was able to go basically from nothing to being somebody. I've struggled my whole entire life, struggled every inch of the way, and then the WIN program came into my life and they helped me, give me a step up. When I first joined the program, I was doing a lot of under-the-table jobs. I applied everywhere I possibly could. Nobody would hire me. It was just really difficult. And when I joined the program, like I said, it helped me out tremendously. It was easy to go through. Super nice people, good people to work with. Fun, really. I got to do some new experiences and totally changed my life completely around. It was fantastic. I enjoyed every minute of it. I first heard about this program through my caseworker, as a matter of fact. I was going through a hard time in my life and she contacted me and gave me an opportunity to better myself. So I got a hold of the WIN program and signed up and it's turned my life around truly since then.
What I love about the WIN program is that I get to work with a whole different agency that I've never worked with before, the Department of Workforce Services. And they have so many different programs that I never even knew about. So they can help pretty much anybody that walks through the door. And I also love that I get to work one-on-one with my participants. Child support, I have a huge caseload and I just struggle to be able to really get to know individual people, and it just makes what I do really rewarding.
Workforce Services brings the case management to this collaboration. We do all of the assessments, support services, whatever they need to set them up for success. This cross-agency approach is effective for the participant because not one agency can do everything. That way they get support from all angles.
The program shifts enforcement to support in different ways. Child supports can be very harsh for people to have to deal with when they don't have the life skills needed to succeed. And this program just brings it forth to everybody who wants to participate in it. You know, they get the skills they need, they get the barriers broken down that they've got. And so to me, it's no longer me pushing people to pay, it's giving them the opportunity to rise above and really get to have life on top of being able to sustain their family. Well, I have many memorable stories of success, but one in particular. He comes from a small town like most of us do in Wyoming. Worked with him for about 15 years. He's just struggled to always, you know, sustain himself and his family. And I thought, oh, I'm just gonna give him a call. I picked up the phone, talked to him a little bit. He was just ecstatic. He's like, please give me this opportunity. We put him in the program. He went through it. He had to do a lot of work on his own, studying at night by himself, and he managed to make it through the program. He now has a career. He has a great job. He's able to take care of his obligations, his family, himself, and he even has extra now for his life. And I'm just really proud that I was part of that along with him.
It's made me feel a lot better about myself, you know, because like I said before, is under the table, the jobs were always hit and miss. You know, either I had 2 or 3 jobs lined up a week, or sometimes not within 2 weeks or a month. And now, you know, I can take my wife out to eat to dinner whenever we want to, you know, or we can go to a trip to Cheyenne or wherever we want to go. You know, I can actually buy clothes for my daughter and buy food for my daughter, you know what I mean, take her out, you know, go spend time, you know, it's really impacted my family life probably most of all because now I can be the dad that I always wanted to be. Never thought I could be that dad, you know, like my dad was to me, you know, and now I get to be that person that my dad was, and that's fantastic.
The success of the Wyoming WIN program is partially due to the amazing DWS staff members whose dedication and commitment drive positive outcomes for these families. Chris, our program manager, plays a vital role in ensuring the success of the Wyoming WIN program. She works closely with child support staff and DWS teams, building strong partnerships that help families achieve stability and self-sufficiency. Through her leadership and collaboration, Chris helps to streamline services and supports, making her a crucial part of the program's ongoing success.
Also at DWS, the workforce specialists receive training, so they are equipped with the tools and knowledge on how to approach participants with that holistic mindset. The training really emphasizes understanding the unique needs of the individual, not just looking at their employment goal, but also addressing some of the barriers that we've talked about in the council meeting over the last 2 days: childcare, transportation, and just their overall well-being. By viewing participants through this whole person lens, the case managers are able to provide that meaningful support. Individuals can be referred to the WIN program either through a court order. So some participants are court ordered to do this, and that's because they're in the rears, so behind with their child support. And we also accept volunteer referrals. The WIN program started as a pilot, and it was a pilot for several years. It started as a pilot program in 2019. Now it's offered in every workforce center across the state. To date, we've served 140 participants, and we've helped collect approximately $275,000 in additional child support. This is definitely a true collaboration, and we chose to highlight this as August was Child Support Awareness Month, and this video and the collaboration was shared by DFS at a national conference.
Just as one final note, for Christina and I, in Onboard, you can find the Workforce Center quarterly report. If you ever have any questions on that or want to learn more, please always feel free to reach out to Christina and I, and we can talk you through it.
Great. Well, thank you, Christina and Trevor. I always love our one-stop operation updates. You guys do all of the heavy lift of helping folks around Wyoming get into the right programs and helping them see the future. And I mean, how many of the one of the things I also stress too is how many of you have visited your local one-stop? I know you did, right? Yeah, you really should. If you haven't done that before, you know, partner with the center manager and get in there and meet some of the employees, see what their challenges are, and maybe even meet some of the participants, you know, that we serve and what challenges that they're facing. So I think the WIN program is great. You know, I love that. Great job on the video. Yeah, any council discussion or questions for either Christina or Trevor? All right, keep up the good work. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Trevor, and your team and staff. All right. Next up on the agenda, drumroll, is our WWDC brand unveiling. So just to make sure, I think it's really important you always think context of why did we change? Why was it important for us to change? We talked about it before. We've always had, that's our logo currently in the upper right-hand corner there. Strong brand, you know, some of the feedback we've gotten from visiting with the private industry and folks, our logo and our brand is easily confused with multiple agencies around the state. You know, obviously everyone uses the script fonts, you know, Steamboat obviously is, you know, sort of state icon. And so we kind of put together a challenge to how do we make a mark that truly stands out, you know, that you can put it up there and realize that is the Wyoming Workforce Development Council. These are the people that are learning and helping implement and overseeing all of the wonderful things that the GWS department does. So it was kind of a heavy task, and of course, like any other state, thinking about potentially going out to bid. Do we want to spend money on an agency to do all that work? And we're very, very, very fortunate that 2 individuals on our council, do come to the table with prior experience and brand and marketing experience, which is referencing to Mr. Duro and Mrs. Hammock there. And so it was very cool. Over the summer, we have had a few meetings on the advocacy subcommittee, and we just thought about what is it that we want this mark to tell the story. We also looked at what do other state boards around the country, what do they look like? So how do we, when you see ours, how does it really stand out? So I don't want to steal any more thunder, and I'll hand it over to Chairman Bureau to walk us through the brand unveiling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll let Rita jump in at any point as well. So as E.T. said, this being our existing logo, it feels a lot like the Wyoming Business Council in particular as well, that we've been confused with on a regular basis. So the script font has been used pretty universally. There are things we like about this logo. Workforce development obviously is prominent here. We like the weight of that. That typeface in particular is bold enough that, Jennifer, if you could move forward one. So the current logo, this is sort of a competitive set of some of the other logos we came across. So you can see a little bolder graphic than what we've got. Some of them, in particular, the Idaho one at the top really identifies the state in a really cool geometric fashion. There's definitely some tendency towards a government feeling logo with a lot of these. So as we're looking at what this might be and how ET may be attending conferences, we wanted to stand out and still feel within that realm. We didn't want to be too wild out there, something that fit appropriately with these, something that feels modern, something that has some weight and strength to it but is identifiable. There's some other small design things that are valuable to be aware of. So minimizing color, which we'll talk about in a second. So what you'll see today is just going to be black and white. We want to involve the whole council in selecting some color options going forward. It'll work in any embroidery, print format, big, small. We made it so it tells a little bit of the story, but it can be used in different size. We have a couple options for that. So there's a lot we were thinking about in creating this next logo. I'll let you move to the next logo so you can see it. So obviously, it's kind of fun to unveil this here at Jackson. The inspiration of that Mountain Dew Duran Teton. It's simplified a little bit. Again, for reproductive purposes, we can make it small, we can make it big. It's clean. It feels very well. I think it's really like a lot about it. It could be anywhere. I don't think people will look at that and say, oh, you're just paying attention to Jackson. You want a little bit of the mountain vibe everywhere. Workforce development, sort of emphasizing the set of text there. And I want to show what different sizes. So we need this thing to work, again, small size, be reproducible forward. The website for ordering a shirt and printing out our tags. So we've got a couple setups there. One more step forward. We also have a more minimal version of it that we imagine being falling into a little bit of the solution we have with the big brands that we may know. Again, priority here is having some bold weight to it. What we're doing is pretty interesting and valuable work, especially as we talk about the next 5 to 10 years of what we're doing. Keeps it a little bit modern, has some weight to it. It's fairly timeless though, it's really reproducible, which is a key thing so that our brand can be protected going forward.
One thing to interrupt real quick. So one of the pieces too, looking at that comp set, we were one of the only organizations that didn't have a mark. Didn't have something that could be recognizable. I mean, Steamboat was the mark, I guess, but that's attached to a million other organizations around the state. And so as Danny was producing this seemed to be kind of the bottom line, like how do we walk away from this process with something that we can remove the Wyoming Workforce Development Council from, as you see in that bottom right, and still have something that is instantly recognizable to the work sitting here, as opposed to small. Sorry.
No, I love that one. As we started looking at the set, we realized that others had spent some effort really setting themselves apart. Sometimes those icons work, sometimes they didn't necessarily tell a story independent of words. We wanted something that could still tell that story, whether we use the WWDC or just the WW here with the mountains on it. So there it is. If there are questions or I'm not sure how we're going to do the color exploration. we haven't gotten that far. This was, there were more iterations here than you would think, which is always kind of a fun thing. Let's simplify it a little bit, just see just how long it takes to get here. What's that?
What do you guys think? Do you like it? Something to get behind? Yeah? WWDC with an outbreak on it, because that's what I love about that. What is that? Well, that gives you an opportunity. I've heard of more personal account. What's the way more personal? Well, we do this and that. So I think it's a very, very strong mark. You know, even again with the expanded logo and the condensed logo, I think it's something that we can all kind of grab onto, and people will see it and they'll hopefully start recognizing, oh, that's the workforce statement, you know, for the state of Wyoming. And when I go, we represent on the national stage, the National Government Association. Like, I want it obviously, selfishly, it's a bit like, you know, I had long hair, I fit. And so I feel like, you know, Danny and the team, over the summer, we mentioned multiple iterations looking at different typefaces and composition, and we really kind of, I think, felt that this was kind of the winner. When we did start kind of going into the color theory, color space, there was a bunch of fun things that we could do here. I think we just kind of like stopped in the middle of what we did. Well, let's let everyone just kind of have an opportunity to get used to the mark, just black and white. But now we got to really kind of pick a nice color brand, and we're going to be using it in all of our presentations and any kind of printed materials for the council. And we wanted to make sure all of you just had a little bit of opportunity to weigh in. What colors do you think really resonate with your council and the state of Wyoming? So we'll probably do most of that facilitation via onboard, you know, between now and our November meeting. So we'll kind of put together a few different color palettes and some different like brand color options, and we'll probably put it out for vote. You guys can provide your comments and your feedback on it. And then basically, when we reconvene in Cheyenne in November, we will officially, at that moment, we're gonna adapt the new mark. And then we'll get the colors all decided, and then from everything here on out, will be, this is us. This is the mark and the brand that represents every single person on this call and in this room. So, it's a great job. One more round of applause for you. Yeah, I still want to get us swags.
Oh,
We actually did set up the store, but then we knew we were rebranding.
Oh,
So
okay.
I never sent it out to anyone because I didn't want you to buy Shui multiple times. It's actually not as hard as we thought it would be to set up the store because we're federally funded. We can't buy anything for you all with federal funds, but we did want to make a store so that you could order what works for you. If it's a hat, we also had vests and polo shirts and cups like the Jackson Hole Cup, and then you can order what you want, and we can, to save on shipping, pick it up for you and bring it to the next meeting or facilitate moving it around the state. So we do have a plan for that. We just didn't implement it 6 months ago because we knew this would happen.
That was literally one of my first things I asked you. I think when I became chair, I was like, we need swag. Where's my polo? Where's all that stuff? And I was like, we can't do something like that. But so yeah, so I think what we'll do between now and November, we'll get this swag store set up, check your onboard, check your emails, and then yeah, we can order that, have it ready for you in November, or in Cheyenne, or we can ship it to you, whatever works for you. And I'm just really excited about that. So, great. All right, so more to come there. And then the next one, you've heard me talk about this for the last couple full council committee of the whole meetings, and this, you know, being a part of this council for nearly 8 years, and serving on primarily one subcommittee, one of the opportunities I thought that this council had was to strategically align and try our very best to get the right people in the right spots at the right time, because that's where the magic happens. There's a philosophy rule from Amazon. Have you ever heard of the 2 pizza rule? 2 pizza rule? Basically, there's a lot of data that supports this. If you have a group meeting and 2 large pizzas cannot feed everyone in the room, the meeting will not be productive. So a lot of organizations, once you start hitting the 7 to 9 threshold, then you're there. Some people participate more than others do. So if you really want true participation and all that stuff, you need to flatten it. you know, and so looking at our subcommittee, so one of the biggest reasons was, we had one subcommittee that had a lot, we had another one that had this, and we had one that had that. And so, at times it was difficult for us to pass meeting agendas. I mean, I remember meetings all of my 8 years, we had to approve, we finally had the right quorum, and we had like 6 meeting minute agendas. This has got to change. Also, one of the things I want to do before I leave you all at the end of March is slowly start setting up some sort of structure if you have interest in leadership, you know, on the council, or if you would like to participate, I encourage you all, even though you're in your own industries and you provide value, try something new. Just remember, this is your one opportunity to be on this council, right? This is the one time in your life that you get to participate. You don't go worry about what is strategic performance and finance, what to learn more about next chapter, you know, next chapter partnerships and career pathways. What about advocacy and living the brand and working with our one stop? What does that look like? This is a really cool career experience for all of you. Try something new if you want. So what we did is we wanted to normalize the amount of community members so that we had a nice equal number, as well as one of the things that, you know, maybe some of you have felt that way too, was I wanted a little bit more structure to the subcommittee. Just what is the purpose of the subcommittee? What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve with these subcommittees? And so we came up with the idea to actually do a more formal approach to it and actually charter them. You know, get these groups together and let's come up with a formal charter. What are our goals? How do we participate in helping the state plan achieve all the stuff it wants to do? And so over the summer, the executive committee, so the executive committee is made up of a few of us, you know, all the chairs of the subcommittees, and we went through the charter process this summer just as kind of a, let's see how it goes. And I think it went really well. I don't know if someone on the executive committee would just kind of like the high level. What did you think about the charter process? Just getting a charter in place for yourself. Anyone want to speak to it? Yeah, David.
I thought it was really interesting, having accepted the role as the chair at the time communications, now advocacy committee, not even considering what the breadth of that was. There's still things that I'm taking in now and thinking about, well, what really would advocacy look like for this council? How can we support that? So when you start formalizing that charter process, it definitely made my understanding puts a little more weight on what I'm doing. I don't know, it was a very interesting process. It's like, yeah, we meet every quarter and we gotta have our conversations and then I'll just report back. So I like it from that perspective. It gave more weight to what these roles are and the value they play with the council.
Thank you for the comments, Sandy. Anyone else want to share?
I think it will be a really useful tool for the subcommittees as kind of a job description, so to speak, because, you know, I think I've been chairman of the Strategic Finance and Performance Committee for a year and a half or so, and we spent like a year just trying to educate ourselves on what we do, what we look at, how can we do it better, and I think this document will help give us that outline.
Yeah, you know, one of the main purposes also too was every single one of you in this room and on this call, we are professionals, we're busy. We have jobs, you know, we've got texts and emails coming in all the time. We recognize just how important it is for you to volunteer your time to be a part of this council and how important it is. And then depending on what's going on, some of you may have a little bit more time or want to get more involved in the council. How do we make bigger and larger impacts? And the idea was how do we build it? How do we give you the opportunity to participate more and dive deeper if you want to, outside of your normal responsibilities. And so we put together the 3, and like we did send out a survey. I didn't want, we had a preference. We wanted to stay in your subcommittee, we wanted to maybe potentially go to another one. So we put that survey out this summer, and we have put together our new roster. So basically, as of this moment right now, potentially some of you are now, we're going to show you the list of councilmen where you're going to be at, how this is going to work, just before we show you that list. So all of you have your subcommittee meetings in August. Obviously, we don't do subcommittee meetings on months that we do a committee as a whole meeting, so we'll resume this sort of like starting with your subcommittee meeting next month, October, you will go to either whatever subcommittee you're assigned to, that's when you'll go to. And what we've done, we wanted the executive committee to go through the charter process first, get familiar with it, what we like talked about it, how did we create that charter? And then I thought it would be a really good idea if you're gonna be joining a new subcommittee with a new team of this council, you all get to participate. So each and every one of you will be participating in the charter process of your subcommittees next month. So the goal will be that by the time that we meet in Cheyenne in November, all the subcommittees have gone through the chartering process. We have very clear defined goals together that all align to our state plan, and all of us should be ready to rock. So yeah, October you'll be, and Jennifer will do all the operations and getting you calendar invites, and of course with new people we might need to look at different times and things like that. So just consider it a fresh start, and like I've mentioned so many times, the meat and potatoes of what we do, there are those subcommittee meetings. We, as a group, only get to meet 4 times. And because we're so large, we're the largest state board in the state of Wyoming, this gives you the true opportunity to participate and engage and bring things to everyone here. So please make sure those subcommittee meetings that happen monthly, very, very, very important that you attend those in between these ones. So, without further ado, Jennifer, do you want to present this?
It's coming. This is in Onward, by the way. I didn't put it until last night because this was a secret.
So can we zoom in a little bit? So, as you can see, I'll kind of walk through this very, very quickly. The executive committee is made up of the chairs of the subcommittees, as well as a few others. So myself, Vice Chair Mr. Kirscher, Jenny Bureau, the chair of our new advocacy committee, Tony Cross, who is our chair of our next generation career pathways subcommittee. We have Travis leading our strategic performance and finance committee. We have Director Gagan on the executive committee as well, and then the executive director of the WWCC, or designee. So that's the executive committee. Then we also have, strategic performance and finance will be composed of Travis, Commissioner Gleason, Vice Chair Kirscher, Mayor Lundvall, Tina Conley, Brenda Morgan, Charlie Wilson, Elizabeth Gage, and also the executive director.
It's Gagan.
I was gonna say,
I don't know why.
who is that? I was reading it, I was like, I've not yet met Elizabeth Gage, so I'm excited to get to become some members recently. And then on the sector partnerships and career pathways committee, obviously chaired by Mr. Cross, Taylor Timmis, Larry Fordor, Deborah, Wendy, Dr. Michelle Aldrich, Ron Goldberg, Dan Meyer, Katie Hogarty. And then on the advocacy committee, we took inspiration from a few other states on the NGA panel, and it was just, what was it called before? Community, public relations, it was a mouthful.
Communications and community relations.
I could never remember that. It's the one we do community stuff on. So we've had a few states that made that kind of their advocacy group, or advocating on behalf of the state of Wyoming and our brand and all that kind of stuff. So the advocacy committee will now be chaired by Mr. Bureau, Bria Hemmick, Ms. Van Cleef, Ryan, Philip Cornella, Nikki Harper, myself, Mr. Williams, and Stacy Balkan. So, yeah, those are going to be, and then one thing, if you are interested, we do have this other committee here. Every now and then I do need a few people to step in and out. This committee is called, it's like an ad hoc committee. When we partner with the Wyoming Department of Training, the Development Fund training, we approve the apprenticeship grants, we do pre-hire, pre-obligation grants, internship grants. So when community colleges and other private entities or state entities are applying for funding from us, we are convened just kind of ad hoc, to go review these grant applications. And basically, our job on that advisory committee is to make recommendations to Director Gagan on the council's thoughts. Should we approve this internship, this apprenticeship grant, etc.? If you're ever interested in being on that committee, currently right now it's myself, Vice Chair Kirscher, Commissioner Gleason, Mayor Lundvall, Charlie, Wendy, and Katie serve on that. But every now and then I might continue to look for 1 or 2 more folks that would serve on the WDTF. And that just happens. I think we've only met historically maybe 3 times a year, and they're really great. So, all right. Those are the new subcommittees. The last piece of this before we transition into committee updates. So again, I encourage you, go meet some new council members that you haven't collaborated before, work with your chairs. You've got, all of you have fantastic chairs here. So again, thank you, Danny, Travis, and Tony. You guys are fantastic in running those meetings. So you've got some really amazing people in your board. We're starting learning some new things. AI task force that we'll be creating, and so I know a few of you reached out to me shortly after our meeting in Riverton. I will have the charter for the AI task force done this weekend, so next week I will be putting that out to the council for review and kind of how long is it, how many people are we looking for, what are the goals of the AI task force. There's been a lot of support for doing an AI task force from the national level. Wyoming actually will be, we're not the first, but we're one of the first to actually create a statewide council with the primary goals being all the technology coming out in the next 5 to 10 years. And truly, like I said before, I personally believe we are in the middle or the beginning of something larger than the Industrial Revolution is happening right now. We need to get involved. So we need to understand the impacts of how Wyoming is going to grow and adapt and change to what is coming. So I will be kind of putting out a call for submissions. I'm just looking for 5 to 7 of you to help put together. We do have a few states that we already have a model after. We're going to be meeting with them as well. Best practices on talking about AI with their state governments and governors and all that stuff. So look for the details next week. AI task force will be kind of starting to formalize, and I'm anticipating our first meeting will be in October. We'll do a monthly meeting and we'll kind of get some roles assigned, make sure everyone knows what the goals are, and then we're going to spend 1 year together. We're going to knock it out. We're going to be the shining example in the NGA of how to build a statewide AI task force. So, and then I will talk more about this in November. I do have ideas. One of my last things I would like to do are things called joint ventures. So I'm just trying to create more and more opportunities for you as council members and DWS staff to participate and better collaborate with other agencies and groups around the state of Wyoming, so that we're not trying to solve the same problems. You know, like someone else is, and then all of us have different rules and regulations. Like, okay, you can help here, I can help there. Cool. So joint ventures really could potentially be an idea of where the WWDC partners with co-collaborators have some of their board members there, like a little basically the Venn diagram. It's kind of what I'm kind of envisioning. So I need to think it through a little bit more, but we'll talk more about that. So I guess really quick before we go, any comments, questions, or concerns about new subcommittee structure, planning for that, AI task force? Happy to answer any and all questions you may have. So either you don't like it or you really do, you know what I say. So I'll say that you do like it. So I really, just get engaged. I'm excited to see how you go through the charter process. I think all of you will enjoy the charter process. It makes you think, like the Danny's point, a lot deeper about your roles and responsibilities about being on this case. Great. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move into one of our final agenda items, committee updates. So I'm going to hand it over to our now chair of our advocacy subcommittee, Mr. Bureau. Do you mind giving us some updates, please?
The priority for the advocacy committee was a new brand, so that definitely has consumed a lot of our conversations lately. It's consuming all my mind right now. What else would we talk about, Bria? Any other one?
That.
That has been the focus, especially in the last month, because we wanted to get ready for this meeting all together. So I would say, if anybody has comments, colors, I know we do some survey there through the onboard, but let me know, contact me directly if you need my email, whatever. I'd like it to be a group discussion, so please do that. That was our priority, so very short.
And it was, I mean, it really did consume the last couple of months, like looking at the brand and making sure it was good, tweaking here and there. What would you say to your new incoming subcommittee members? Should they know about this?
I'm still getting my brain around it a little bit, but anybody that's incoming to our subcommittee, we're going to have more of a focus. We've talked about communications before. We're going to have more of a focus. I would like to understand legislative issues, things at the state level that will be really valuable for us to know about going forward. I'm going to ramp up. I've reached out to a couple of our one-stop operators. Want to ramp up communication with them so we can be a little more of a bridge for this council out with people boots on the ground doing the work. So that's going to be one of the big pushes that I want to get after with the subcommittee, that it isn't just us communicating within this room, we're advocating for this whole council and DWS coming back in. So it's going to be a little more comprehensive and involved, is my intention.
Chair Bureau. All right, we're going to move on to a quick update from our chair, Chili, on the Central Partnerships for Others. Also, would you like to say any words of wisdom to yours?
Actually, he's not the secretary.
involved in finance.
Yep, so I'm excited for the new committee, and kind of our three main orders of business is reviewing the budget, process variance, providers that go on the ETPL list. And so I think we've been doing a good job in the last year understanding that role deeper, trying to make it clear as it comes up to you as the council. You know, one thing that might help is, you know, in processing grant applications or providers that we're recommending, is maybe give you all a little bit of background on the discussion that we had in those regards. So constant tweaks to our process to make it easier and help you all understand.
All right, last one is Mr. Price.
Thank you. First of all, I love the logo. For the brand name, I think it looks terrific. Also, I'm colorblind, so I'm going to abstain from that part of it.
Me too.
I love the black and white version. Welcome to any new members of the committee. Looking forward to working together. I'm available to talk to anyone who wants to talk prior to your meetings or feedback outside of meetings, whatever. Our October meeting is going to be a little later in this cycle than it normally is because I'm going to be overseas during the regular time. So A, sorry about that, but B, not 100% certain we'll be ready for prime time with the charter in November, but we'll get that as far down the road as we can. And hopefully, we do have a meeting scheduled for October. It's just going to be a little more compacted close to the November time. We are way ahead of schedule, and we have decided to have the Next Gen Academy in Cheyenne next year in April. The exact date is to be determined. But we've had great success with Cheyenne and with that timing for a number of reasons, which I won't get into. Record attendance really being the primary one. So we'll have a specific date, I'm not really sure when, but probably the second or third week-ish in April of next year. And it'll be at the Department of Workforce Services offices. It's going to be 4 in Cheyenne, so looking forward to that. And then I'm going to bounce it over to Larry, who has some information to share on behalf of the committee as well. Thanks.
Thank you. So our Next Gen partnership we have in Laramie County is based on construction at this point. So I've got a few updates. The first one I want to talk to the group about is actually looking for input for all the great power we have in this room. I know we're from all different industries, but everybody has great ideas. One of the big concerns that came out of our most recent Next Gen Sector Partnership meeting was the data center construction that is underway in the Cheyenne area. There's currently, for those that don't know, 3 data centers under construction right now. 10 additional data centers are either in planning or permitting phases. The impacts we've seen already with this data center construction, there's been some unintended consequences of all this work coming to our community at once. We've worked hard over the last 15, 20 years to develop our workforce. And at this point, there's such a drop for the work at the data centers. They're paying premium wages that is very difficult for Wyoming companies to compete with at this point. The schedules are compressed to the point where there's a lot of hours on those projects. The scope of work on those projects is large enough that there are very few Wyoming contractors that can participate in those projects due to the schedule constraints and the size of the scope. So what we've seen is a lot of our local workforce is being drawn to those data centers away from Wyoming companies to go work on those projects. And obviously, these data centers, you know, I've heard the argument for every dollar we invest to bring a data center to Wyoming, there's $27 on the backside of the state. All those things are great, but not at the sacrifice of a lot of Wyoming businesses in the area. As we lose workforce, as our suppliers, all of our suppliers' numbers are down. A lot of this material for the data centers is coming from out of state with non-state contractors rather than buying locally, those types of things. So we're seeing major impacts already, we're under construction. I'm just asking for help where we can put the lines together, so we can try and develop a plan before the next 10 data centers come behind this. And obviously, there's got to be a way for Wyoming contractors to coexist with the construction that's going to happen. We're in a kind of a perfect storm scenario in Laramie County, not just with data centers. The Sentinel project that's coming, the GBSD project that's coming, Kenner's nuclear project now. So the pressures on the construction industry in Wyoming are huge. And I think, going through the statistics earlier, they say 4,000 jobs between now and 2032. Well, they need 6,000 people to hit. That's way more than what they're showing in the statistics. GBSD, they're anticipating 3,500 to 4,500 workers needed for the GBSD project. Those are workers we don't have. Director Hagan and I spoke, there's training dollars for apprentices and things like that, which is great. I can only have so many apprentices per journey. We have a 1-to-1 ratio apprentice per journey. If my journeyman gets sorted out, I can't put more apprentices on because I'm not a ratio. And it's all different trades being impacted. I know the electricians and plumbing and pipe fitting seem to be the worst impacted currently, and that was forecasted. I just don't know how we respond to maintain our Wyoming companies. There's a few electrical firms in the Cheyenne area. One was a 60-man shop just a few years ago. They're down to 8 employees. Another electrical shop was a 40-man shop. They're down to 7. And their ownership has bags out in the field trying to complete the contracts that they already had in place. I know my competitors on the plumbing pipe fitting side, they've been impacted greatly. We've seen some impact as well. I'm not sure what the solution is. It's inevitable. This is coming. This is happening. Just looking for any input from the group on maybe how we can structure that to do a better job coexisting with the pressures we're seeing coming down the pipe, and still have something left in Wyoming when this boom passes us. I just fear that at some point, data center construction or GBSD, it's all going to wrap up in a similar time frame without any local businesses for those workers to return to. We're going to be in trouble. So that's my plea for the group. If we can put our heads together, and it's going to be a major impact. Right now, Laramie County sees it. I see that heading west. As soon as the other infrastructure pieces are put in place in the western part of the state, this data center construction is going to continue in Wyoming and continue to move west. So it will start impacting other areas as well. So that's the biggest concern coming out of our next gen group. And just, I think collectively we got a lot of bright lines and creative solutions are welcome. Sorry,
everyone just add, so this, as Larry said, this was discussed in the next gen group, and I think the next gen model is a way to potentially try to address or help this issue, but definitely not the only way and definitely not enough. And so I think, thanks Larry for bringing that up, the collective brain power of the council is needed. And I'm guessing we're probably short of time, but yeah, I know Larry has one more update real quick, but please, share thoughts anytime. Larry,
I just wanted to add to that one big problem is we've talked about this years ago. This was a problem. This problem just didn't come up. And one of the huge issues is large out-of-state workforces coming in and doing these jobs. It's more or less essentially on some of the bigger projects like wind farm projects, pipeline projects, any pipelines going on. They do not hire people from Wyoming. So these guys that come in here and are building wind turbine wind towers, I mean, I'm all for it, like, their jobs are good jobs. They don't do it safe, they don't, you know, they're not paying people well, and on top of it, they're bringing people from out of state to do it. So that's another kind of workforce issue, is we don't have any workforce because it's been brought in for us the last few years. We don't have any workforce.
I think, you know, it's my 2 cents on it. Thank you, Larry, for sharing and Phil, your thoughts. I know this is, it's also a good reminder, even though we're on some committees, to co-collaborate. You know, it's you're on some committees, we have opinions or ideas or thoughts on how to address this. Get involved, that's why you're here. And you know, this is going back to why I'm creating the task force. This is the beginning. It's not going away. Like, yes, Laramie County is the first that's kind of taking a lot of that. I foresee this happening in other counties around Wyoming over the next couple of years. And so we can't look at it, I don't think, as a problem. It's an opportunity for us to step up our game. However we do that, is that we all know it's such a complex problem. All the conversation we've had today, where we house them, we have health care for them, we have daycare for these people. I mean, it's a huge, whoa, all these things are intertwined. And so it can kind of feel impossible at times, but we just got to get creative. And once again, I always encourage, I guarantee somewhere else, whether it be in the United States or even outside of the US, they have other solutions. So it's really about us doing our due diligence on who is doing this well, how are they doing it? Is there something that is transferable to our county to do that? So it's a challenge. I would say it's a very big challenge for the state of Wyoming in its future. And it's really
Mr. Chairman, one more quick update from our next gen.
Sure.
I'd rather leave on a positive note. So in our last meeting, we had some good discussions. The school district, Laramie County School District number 1, has worked with us to develop a trades academy. So that is going to be at East High School and South High School for now. The school district has decided to brand that the Next Gen Trades Academy at those 2 high schools. So there's students at each of those high schools that have identified a trades pathway for their career. So it's a cohort that we will get one-on-one time with those students once a week throughout the semester. And then as that develops, they will have internship opportunities. There's a whole plan in place that the school district has developed that's very interesting as these kids complete whatever it might be, a career fair or OSHA training or whatever along the way. They accumulate a bank account and they get paid for each one of those deals. And the interesting piece that the school district suggested is that your only way to participate in the Trades Academy is to be a Next Gen partner and attend meetings. So they're helping us with recruitment, we're helping them by getting in front of the students and offering them different opportunities. So I believe maybe in November, the school district's going to come and present at our November meeting, and he'll put the whole plan out in front of you guys. So I just wanted to offer that preview. But I think South High maybe has 35 students who are already signed up for that cohort, and East High School has about 45 students that have committed to that cohort for the Next Gen Trades Academy. We're hoping to expand to Central High School, and if this works, we might have a model in place that we can take to other communities around the state and get the other school districts on board with some of this.
Yeah, that's great. And like I said, the work that each of these subcommittees is doing, I'm really excited about. You guys have a lot to pat yourself on the back for. You guys doing a lot of really great work. So yeah, we've got a lot of work yet to do. And I think, I'll kind of close before we go into public comment. When we were listening to the housing panel, which I thought was really fascinating. There was so many cool ideas there. It's really, you can tell that panel, they were truly passionate about what they were doing and how they were approaching these problems and the creativity that they had to do to get around that. But the one thing that stood out to me was the fact that Wyoming is so big. Once again, we're the 10th largest geographical state in the country, and we always show we're one big city. We're not even 590,000 people. When we were at the NGA conference in Billings, the governor was like, yeah, we're trying to do 1.5 million. Like, we're a third. And let me remind you all, Wyoming is a third of that population. And sometimes in our communities, we can feel alone, right? We've got Jackson doing this thing, we've got Cheyenne doing this thing, Casper's doing this thing. And it's always about remembering that if one community in one city wins, we all do. So if Jackson's doing something really well, it's a win for Wyoming as overall. And one of my favorite quotes, and if you know where this comes from, you are immediately my new best friend, which is, when the snow falls and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, the pack survives. Right? So we can't do this on our own. Every community, every city, sharing ideas, coming together to solve very large problems. So yeah, when the snow falls, white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, the pack survives. So be a pack, you're a pack. You will not die. Anyone know what this is? I'll leave that to you. You search for it. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and open it to any public comment and or council business. Any quick things, questions, things this group needs to be made aware of before we begin our travels? Yes, Charlie.
This comes to my mind in these conversations every time, and we're sort of, how do we keep our youth? How do we have the workforce? How do we sort of be a viable state? Unfortunately, I think it's sort of the conversation. And when we had there was a research project that was commissioned by this group in Harvard.
Oh yeah, Harvard.
It was, the Harvard profile? Yeah, it was presented when I sort of came on board. And the primary takeaway that I think he was making was essentially, Wyoming needs a city. And I know we live here because of open space and all the values that come with that. But I kind of think they said to us, unless we develop a metropolitan center, we don't really have much of a shot at making any of those goals. And I think that's a very interesting puzzle if you want to get creative. And I've had the conversation with several friends. It's an interesting conversation, but how do you create a metropolitan center in a state with less than, we're a little over 500,000 now. That's fascinating. And where would it be and what kind of size is it? But when you talk about the educational opportunity to draw for industry, to draw for increased population and so forth, but that's kind of what he was saying to us.
Yeah, like I said, I would argue that the next 10 years not always the most important time that Wyoming is ever going to see, as far as growth and change and who knows where it will go, but it's big, it's big. Any other public comments or online or remote, and have any questions or things that need to be made aware of? All right, well, before I actually adjourn us, 2 quick updates. I'm going to let you know about where are we going in 2026. So, as you know, one of the changes I also made, I love the fact that one of our council members, they got this idea from the NGA, has to host us, right? You know your communities really well, you know the people we should be talking to, and how do we have, I love bringing in panels, like housing and economics and all that stuff. So really, I always look for a host from the council. So think about your own cities, and if you ever do want to host this council, basically we'll be working with Jennifer and team on just location ideas and who should we talk to and what topics should we be discussing. So if you ever want to host the council, please obviously reach out and let me know. But we do have 2 folks that have decided to host us next year. So as you all know, our next set of meetings will be in Cheyenne in person for our Q4 meeting, November
5th and 6th.
November 5th and 6th. We try to strategically align that around the governor's business forum. It's kind of at the same time, so Great Cheyenne, you get involved, etc. So that'll be our last meeting of 2025. We do our remote Q1 meeting for 2026. We'll just be via Zoom. It'll be a 1-day meeting that we'll do in January. And then we usually take the opportunity in the May timeframe and September timeframe, pick 2 cities go, and we will be going in May to Gillette. So, Gillette crew, we now have 3 council members that represent the great city of Gillette. So we have Mayor Lundahl, and we have Deborah, and Wendy. And then for our fall meeting in 2026, we will be going to Saratoga. So Danny will be the host of our Saratoga meeting, and so obviously the actual dates will get by the November meeting, but so basically remote, Gillette, Saratoga, Cheyenne is what your calendar for 2026 is. We do get those dates in early so that you can kind of plan around all your busy schedules for it. And then last but not least, just remember, and what I appreciate most about this council is like everyone look at that trajectory. Every single person has a different viewpoint. I can't see what's behind it, but Charlie can. You know, remember that's what makes valuable growth important. Every single one of you come with a different perspective. We all have different beliefs, but as long as we can see a problem, and say the projector's a problem, we see it all from this, we can come together and make a really solid decision. So just realize your perspectives are so valuable to these meetings. So appreciate each and every one of you. You're awesome. Wish you safe travels home. Thank you again for taking the time to come up here and share your stories. Hopefully you're taking a lot away from our Jackson committee. And once again, huge shout out to Tony and team. Thank you, Tony. For all of us, you know, being able to see behind the scenes. I know you were in your hair, so thank you so much for hosting. It was fantastic. So, all right, everyone. Well, with that, it's been great to see you all. Safe travels home. We'll see you in Cheyenne in November. And enjoy your new subcommittees, get some charters going, and we'll get you some updates in November. Until then, I formally will adjourn our Q3 2025 meeting, Workforce Development Council.